participants to come. Yes, I want to ask as the other participants to come in to just share with us what is on your news highlights this morning, either related to this meeting or not. What is trending in your country? If you could have one or two people to just engage this morning. Today's session is going to be quite engaging so that we can hear what is going on in your spaces. Again, good morning. I'm asking for engagement. I just want to know what's dominating your news highlights this morning. Since we're talking about communication, we're talking about media. What are some of the topics that are trending in the space where you are?
Hello.
Hello, Godwin.
Yes, good morning. Okay, well, I don't know what time is it over there, but it's morning here, Ghana.
Okay, you must be 2 hours behind Nairobi, where we are, where this is. So it's 9 o'clock in Nairobi.
Oh, okay, 6 a.m. 6
Oh,
a.m.
that's
in
an
Ghana.
early start. Thank you for being here.
Yes, yes. So, in relation to what you just said, on my news highlight here is our president has been petitioned to remove the EC chair, the Electoral Commission chairperson.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what is there now, and I think that's the big news for the country.
Okay.
And that's the highlight.
Are you having elections soon?
We had our election in December, but there were some, issues surrounding the election. So because of it, some people have petitioned the president to get the chairperson out.
Okay.
So that is the big issue this morning.
All right. Thank you so much, Godwin. So we've heard from Ghana. That's the big thing. Not very different from Nairobi. Only difference in Kenya is that we are trying to constitute the IBC in preparation for our elections, which should be in the next, I believe, after 2 years. Collins says, and related to this meeting, of course, is a USAID funding pause. We do know that when the American president came in, one of the things he did is to say that there'll be a pause on projects or funding for programs outside of the country for 3 months to begin with, which I think is affecting very many sectors. I know even the medical sector is being affected by that, some projects, so they have to wait and see. So that touches, I guess, across to all of us, some uncertainty before we know what will happen. And I think already some memos have begun filtering out in that. Paco says most interesting topics going on in Botswana is AI in today's generation. How safe is AI? AI for exams, AI for writing cover letters, AI for doing your assignments, AI for your research reports. That's quite interesting. So so we see how that is. Anyone else who can tell us what's going on in their landscape? We just want to get, as we wait, I think we are a good number. Yesterday we were many more than this, but let's just hear as we warm up, as also we get to know each other. And when you speak, just introduce yourself as well and say where you're speaking to us from. I'd like to hear from those especially outside Nairobi, also, or those including. Please just speak up and let us know what's happening in your end of the world.
In South Africa, this is Nyarai from South Africa. The president has recently signed an expropriation bill in place, and there are fears from all over the sectors about the negative consequences. I'm sure people have learned from the land reform in Zimbabwe. So it is not yet clear, the way the bill is stated. It's just a land expropriation bill, but the government actually has the right to take land without compensation. So if it goes down that route, then we are not sure of the consequences yet, but people are just raising fears that this might be another land reform in Zimbabwe and there will be bloodshed, economic downturn, and all those things.
Thank you, Nyarai, for that, and wishing Zimbabwe all the best with the new challenges. I guess we always say the more things change, the more they remain the same, and hopefully that even that reform as it takes place is not going to be too negative. Mofokeng is telling us from South Africa, there's a continuing storm around the second term of the president and the aftermath of the release of the murderer of Chris Hani. I guess it was probably a presidential pardon, or he did his term, I'm not sure. Tanzania, I was looking forward to this response. Rehema says the Africa Energy Summit, which is ongoing, featuring many heads of states. They're already here. African Development Bank also a key player in that one. So we see, and hopefully it will have positive gains for that. I think Africa is quite ready to support one another in this area. And if we look at, for those of you who are in this area, you can also tell us probably what are the gains that you want to, or outcomes you want out of this. Two more responses. Anybody from the north of Africa, Ethiopia, upward, Somalia, Sudan, any of those areas? We want to hear what's going on there. And West Africa. We've heard from Ghana. Thank you. Anyone else who is not in any of those questions, countries mentioned?
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Tulimo Shona from Namibia, area of expertise, mid-science. What is trending in our news is the fight between government and one of the opposition political leaders, where the fight is all about whether to remove the red line or not. He is fighting for the removal of the red line, and the government is against the removal of the red line. So basically, Namibia, in terms of farming, is separated into two parts. We call one north of the veterinary cordon fence and the other one south of the veterinary cordon fence, which is then separated in between by the red line. So the south of the veterinary cordon fence, they are able to sell their cattle to international markets, such as the EU, USA, China, and so forth. And the north of the veterinary cordon fence, they are not able to do so. We do have some markets in Africa, such as Ghana, Congo, South Africa. So now the fight is, why maintain the red line? Why not give equal opportunities to all of the farmers? So that is what is currently trending at the moment. So it's of interest to me because it's kind of directly related to my area of expertise.
I like what you've said. There's something we'll talk about today in terms of background research. And I like, that you brought an area like this that is so unique. You'd wonder, I'd be interested in the background, and we just don't have the time to look at that. In the background between how the red line was decided, who decides which meat market is going to the south and which one is coming to the north in terms of for sale. So like you said, Tulimo, very interesting, and I hope you can be able to share on the TCC WhatsApp group if you haven't already joined with your fellow researchers what the outcome would be on that. It's a good area that you can continue with, and an area of interest because we are all meat eaters. South African meat is very tasty. I know you're from Namibia, but I guess it's you have the same wind or air that comes in that space. So yeah, would love to be updated through the chats. If you're not already on the chat, I think Kevina had already shared a link yesterday. We will share it today on how you can join the team there. One last person, then we'll read one or two from the chat. Anyone else who wants to share with us? Thank you so much for those insights.
Hello, hello everyone. I'm
Hey,
calling from
Didier.
Cameroon. Yes, the headlines revolve around the need for foreign workers to abide to the laws of the country, and also there's growing trends or discussions around AI in education. So these are two important trends. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And they'll come to be a lot. I think each of these things is touching, but you also realize that a lot of our news is definitely dominated by politics, by politics, and such matters that have, if you look very hard, I don't know if there's anybody, before we close the discussion, is there anybody who has anything that is related in your area or your field, others than the funding of the projects? USAID funding, I can see it's in more countries than one. The USAID funds and related projects. Is there anybody else who has a science topic or a research topic that is trending in their country that they want to share? Okay, if not, we can share it in the chat if there is, but welcome everyone again to day 2 of the training. Today we are going to focus mainly on we're going to focus on writing for the media or communicating with the media, or how we we understand the media landscape and what we do with that information. The reason why we are moving on to this is I know most of us had sought to see also how you can do your research, how you can be able to publish papers and things like that. But what we are preparing you for at the end of this training this year is to think about how all that research that you're doing, everything that you're writing, the papers that you're presenting, how do they move from your desks, from your research conferences, from your policy papers, from your white papers, and move to the rest of the industry, move to the rest of the common people, and to see how, how you can be able to better market yourselves in those spaces. We also said yesterday, this is the year for being visible insofar as your position allows you, insofar as you know your hierarchy of speaking to media and the media engagement. And we're going to be looking at some of the ways in which we can get out of our traditional stereotypes and think about, where can I write, who can I write for, what can I do? So even as managers in the workplaces where you are, whether whether as a researcher, this training, today's training, which is hands-on, is going to be useful, because you begin to think about, when you're talking about certain topics and you're engaging with your communication colleagues and you're asking them, why don't we have visibility? What are we not doing? Is to also help you to think out of the box as a leader and engage proactively, and don't just wait for the comms teams to come to you and say, we have this and this that is going on, how can we engage? So we want to understand the media landscape. Next slide, please. And I think we want to begin by asking the question, what are some of the shifts in media trends we have seen in the last 25 years? We do know that the media landscape is changing. We have tons of options of which media house you want to use, you want to target. But can we also share once again, what are some of the shifts in media trends that you've witnessed over the last 25 years? I want to move it over 25 years because that's when we started using, what is it called? Facebook, which was one of the first social networking apps that was introduced around that time, and to see what has happened. What have you seen as the difference? If you look at that picture, our traditional media is radio, the television, the newspapers, magazines, and then the internet. But the internet has also changed. And how have you seen the trends changing, even on your own personal use? We'll take 3 responses quickly. I would also encourage those who have not said anything in this meeting to speak to us. Bernard has opened for us the media landscape. They shift to social media, instant news, live updates, and streaming. That's true. Can we hear someone else? What have we seen as some of the shifts in media trends in the last couple of years? Anyone in your workplaces? What is moving? What are you having to open your minds to and accommodate in terms of how you communicate your findings, how you speak about your work, how you highlight and profile your organization? What is shifting? Anyone else before we continue? Okay, so did you say on the media landscape, we have 1 minute, we have social journalism, social media, and recently science journalism, especially in health. Excellent. Was that Godwin? Was that you who wanted to share something?
I just wanted to add that there is a shift towards video conferencing in terms of delivery.
Yes.
In the media space. So now you don't have to travel miles to just attend a seminar or listen to a conference presentation or whatever. So there's that kind of shift in the educational landscape and also in the media landscape. Yeah.
Thank you. That one, which is both good and bad, I'm sure. There is an accessibility for many more people, as you said, to attend this virtual meetings and workshops and seminars and things like that, just like this one. But also on the flip side, it's reduced, and thanks to COVID, our footprints, which is also good, I guess, for the carbon footprints. I mean, for it's good for what is it called? It's good for the environment. We don't need to have so many flight hours leaving the country to be able to go and present a paper for 2 hours, and also saving money. But I guess we still do want to travel. So I usually look at that as it's a catch 50-50. Thank you, and hooray for accessibility and being able to bring more people to the table to speak about what they're doing. Yeah, but we are also losing that one-on-one touch, which would have done if there was a conference break or something like that. We have a few more responses. Social media has taken over. Some information is full of misinformation. Correct. More presence of podcasts than radio, Skyping. There's been an improvement in communication at workspace, as it is now instant due to technological development. Yes, you don't have to wait for the office memo. You don't have to wait for that big directory. It's usually an email. And then, of course, we also say the flip side is the ones that are sent in the middle of the night that you have to attend to, and they get lost in your tons of emails in the morning. Media is used sometimes for disinformation, correct? And we need to ask, who is this who is disinforming? Why are they not passing the right information? Why are we losing the rights? Why is the media process not handled properly? We saw it during COVID-19, where all was said in medias. Of course, we always say that anytime there's a gap in information or a delay where we are not able to hear the information, then it means that people form their own opinions. AI is good, but some people are using it to spread misinformation on social media. That's correct. It's a question I wanted to ask yesterday and I'll ask today. The person who's speaking about misinformation or lack of information, I want to just share this example. It's not on my slides, but I think it's important for us to look at it in terms of disinformation. Recently, there was some controversy in Kenya about funding by the Gates Foundation on vaccination of cows. And the information that was given to the country, if I am saying it correct, is that all cows or all animals will be vaccinated. So the disinformation began about what vaccine is this, what are you giving people, what is it? It was shared by the president. And then, of course, because of the space that we are in, and the what do you conspiracy theories, especially coming out of COVID-19 and the vaccines that came with it, and you know what people are saying about the MNR, even those people who are falling ill. So that disinformation, I began to wonder, even as I was preparing for this presentation, and to ask, do you think we would have handled this information better? The people who are in the space of livestock research and the agriculture space, could somebody tell us whether we would have handled this information correctly? I think there's a lot of disinformation about the purpose of that vaccination campaign, which I believe has not taken off. It should have started this month. Just share with us one or two. I don't know, I am hoping this is safe space, but really your thoughts. Oscar, can you please give us a response?
Yes, I don't know whether what you are referring to was when a minister was presenting to the president. I don't know whether it is in your country, whereby they used tetanus as example. I think that what's delayed in responding to those allegations is the bureaucracies that we have in our various settings. Because if the big man over there do not get up to say something, even though you have the idea, you can counteract what the fellow is saying based on scientific principles, the bureaucracies do not permit you for you to respond. I think that is why we have a very big gap in our system. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much. Yesterday we spoke, and I think we have said it again. We know how the hierarchy in organizations work. You have your public spokesperson, the person who is allowed to speak on behalf of the organization to media. You have your managers who are also authorized to speak or to give interviews. And even the things that we are discussing today, I always say have to be within company policy and limits. But that's true. Oscar, I don't think we are talking about the ethanol incident, but you're right about that. You as a researcher, I think it would be difficult if you're in that space and you have to counter what has been said, or say that maybe the minister or the person high up is not speaking the truth or is not saying the truth, or to counter, then it has to come from a public body. And I think one of the associations actually tried to come and give us the correct information and say what was the value of what was going to happen. But by then, as we have said, social media just ran with the conspiracy theories. But I always wonder, and because I did not see, and this is just my own thinking, please don't, whether the Gates Foundation should have come out clean and just tried to explain. But then now we get into what do we call into diplomatic issues when it comes to that. You know, there's only a way that the donor can be able to say something if the country head has said. But I'm just thinking about that, and food for thought for all of us. Food for thought for all of us about how we could have handled that crisis better, because some of these things you're faced if you're in those organizations that are actually at the forefront of some of these things, policy making, you're doing vaccines, you're doing campaigns, you're informing people about what you're doing. So let's continue to think in that sense. Now back to the presentation. Let's go to the next slide, please. So we've said that the landscape is changing. We have options, what you can use. Our traditional media, we all know, is print. We are talking about newspapers and magazines. We're talking about radio, FM station, television, magazines, and the internet. But getting an opportunity to be interviewed on these platforms is much harder because they get inundated with requests. All of you, your PR managers, your communication managers, their job is to make sure there's visibility for the organization. We all want to appear on XYZ media. Recently, we had an issue where we were, one of our fellow communicators was in a space where they're saying they have a client who wants to get onto TV, and she wants an interview in one of the public spaces. But you can imagine what the topical issues angling for that. And this is a retired judge, and she wants to do something on media. And everyone was, yeah, well and good, but try and get her also on a podcast or something like that. But because our minds are hell-bent on, we want to be in the newspaper, we want to be seen on TV, we need to debunk that. These opportunities are few on these platforms because they get inundated with requests. Next slide. Now, when we think about that, now we go to social media. I think we have all talked about social media, its pros and cons, but the thing is that social sells. Social media is no longer a tool just for photos and personal messaging, but it has turns out to be a big player in information dissemination and is one of the fastest. One of the things about social media is also it's a low value, or you don't need a lot of capital to be able to start. Once you're serious about getting your equipment out, but can you imagine how many experts we have on TikTok at the moment, just saying anything and everything, and all they need is a mobile phone to be able to put themselves out there. So there's so many people who are out there. So it's turned out to be a big play in information dissemination, including the disinformation, and it's one of the fastest. How it works is that it applies a content-focused approach. And when you think about it, social media for work, the whole purpose is to educate and entertain for your business or the organization that you work for. That's how you think when you think about that space outside of, for work basics, it has to be content focused. The theme is experiment with the new and stay with the old. Do it in bits. I don't know how many of us here are on traditional Facebook, are on traditional now X, formerly Twitter, as a way in which you share or upload statuses to do with your work or things that are of importance to you that you want to let out. And sharing with blogs and things like that, using WhatsApp also to convey information. As I've said, one of the ways in which we can share information is through the TCC WhatsApp chat, where you can, you find each other and you figure out what's working, what innovations we are doing, who's launching a new program, a new product, come to my conference, and all those things. So the thing is, you experiment, you stay with the old, but experiment with the new. TikTok is one of the fastest growing. And of course, we've seen the controversy surrounding ownership, access rights. Is it going to be used to spy on us and things like that? That's in the big nations. They're allowed to have those kind of discussions and things like that. So we look at them and we say, experiment with the new slowly as you get to learn how those platforms work. And then social media also capitalizes on existing social media. You can use it to capitalize on existing social media assets. That means if you're using social media for work, leverage on what you use to communicate in a fresh manner every time. That means you don't have to jump from one channel to another. If your office is traditionally, your followers are traditionally on Facebook, use Facebook and just continue to make it fresh, update it and things like that. If you're on Twitter, if that's your official product, continue to update it and refresh it. If you're on LinkedIn, if you use LinkedIn or you support your managers to be able to put content on platforms like LinkedIn, then you keep it fresh. Just make sure that every time there's an appearance, every time there's something new or a thought to share, you're just updating. So you leverage what you use because you already have followers on that page. By the time you had built maybe 100,000 followers on Facebook or 100 or 20,000 followers on a personal level on X, it becomes harder for you to build followers on a new trend. So just stay on what you're already using. YouTube is another channel that is being used a lot. Organizations can also use it once in a while. And if you understand how to use it, which is why one of the fastest growing jobs these days is for digital managers in terms of how they're able to come. We want a digital manager who's fresh, who's creative, who's savvy, who can be able to churn out content for organization and things like that. It's one of the fastest growing. So work on the existing social media assets. So social media also works with paid campaigns. Many companies, especially business companies, have moved from traditional media advertising in the newspaper, because the question is, who reads media? Who reads the newspaper anymore? And if we're reading the newspaper, we're reading the newspaper on online. You know, even in jobs, most of them are being sent online. There's links and everything on social media. So we have paid campaigns, and they've moved to using paid ads, paid campaigns. If you're on Instagram, you'll realize this is a promoted page or promoted content, and it comes into your feed, of course, using algorithms to be able to bring something that is of interest to you based on what you have been looking at or learning. So we have these paid campaigns. That's why also, if you watch YouTube, a lot of what you find is people talking about courses that they are doing, or businesses advertising on YouTube, which also supports the creators of the page that you're watching. But at the same time, it could be intrusive, deciding on what you want to do. But those are paid campaigns. It could be one of the areas or things that you could choose. Even when you're advertising seminars and webinars, just put it. It's also cheaper to advertise on this on these platforms than it is to on traditional media. So I guess you just have to do the homework and the math. For social media, you must have a clear ideology on why you want to use it for work purposes. You must be true to your organization's identity. You must be true to your identity as a senior researcher, as a chief researcher with a name. You're not like the juniors who have come in and they're excited and everything is a post, you know. And avoid the clutter and the noise, because there's so much noise. But I mean that you have for there. And someone says the problem with traditional media is too much gatekeeping of ideas and misinformation to protect careers. That's correct. What makes print media thrive in a digital era? What's the future of print media? The future of print media, I don't think we can get over with print media, because some of those, we cannot exactly put it out. One of the things I realized when I visited South Africa last year is a lot of the newspapers that were traditional there and at the height have actually folded or closed. And I was speaking to one of my former academic supervisors and who runs a research consultancy. And it's sad to see the papers that you used to read when you're in college are no longer there. But radio is still thriving, and we're going to go into a slide that actually shows that it's still there. So I think it will not be eliminated 100%, because there's room for that. And there are people, especially offices, that must just read the newspaper. You know, even some of you, you know that you prefer your hard copy newspaper. So it has its place, as social has its place, especially for the older generation. They are more set in their ways and they want the hard paper. So there's that value for that. And then, of course, the Gen Zs and staff who are coming in and who are quickly phasing out social media. Next slide, please. Let's look at these consumption patterns, which will actually help us to be able to debunk that. This is a survey by it's a Kenyan survey that was done to look at uptake of our media consumption patterns. And if you look between the year 2014 and 2023, radio remains king. Radio is still one of the highest listened to mediums. You know, radio, it's on your phones, it's on your cars as you're driving to work, it's in the matatu or tuk-tuk or boda boda when you're going, it's everywhere. It's in the stations where you go to eat, it's in your eating places. Radio is everywhere. I think the fact of its accessibility, and that's why it has not gone down in everywhere. Then you have community radio that is speaking only to a certain area. That's why it remains one of the hugest mediums. Still, it remains king. It's only moved from 2014 to between 92% and 77%. But let's look at newspapers. Newspapers in 2014 were at 21% in terms of uptake, maybe then because of the cost. But by 2023, only 7% of those who are interviewed for this research are still looking at media. This was done by the Communications Authority of Kenya. As you can see, a national survey, July to October 2023. So when you look at this part, at this, you're seeing it's true. Television still remains high. I'm not sure why we had higher viewing patterns in 2023 in terms of of TV and the COVID years, which were about to, I'd want to see the stats between 2019 and 2021, 22 rather, to see how we look, I mean, how much time we spent on TV in those days when we were confined. But this you can see are the patterns. Radio remains king. There's still a bit of TV that we're watching. Online has risen from 21% in 2014 to 57% in 2023. Next slide. So you can see that when we think about it, we continue to grow our patterns. But because we are focusing on, after we finish this discussion, what are we doing with this information? We're trying to help ourselves see how can we put the information and the data we have and become more news sources. I want you to become a news source wherever you are, so that people are looking at you, they are reading you in the blogs you write for, in your LinkedIn profiles, to be able to hear, so that you become an authority in this area. Traditional, that newspaper we are saying, why does it print? How does it look? When you look at a newspaper layout, you have your front page, and the front page is always, if it leads, it bleeds. That means we put all the bad stories, all the big headlines, all the noise from the politicians, everything that is eye-catchy, that will make you, even if you didn't want to read the paper, you're like, what is this story talking about? You know, so you have your front page, you have your news articles on page 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. You have your feature articles, which come most of the time in the middle of the newspaper, or some of the news articles actually turn into features. And then you have your bylines. Who wrote this story? Something maybe in research by Oscar, Vetsi, by Tulimo. Those are your bylines, who has written the story. Then you have your editorials. Editorials are written with the voice of the editor sitting at the desk, what he has looked and scanned in his paper as topical, what are the big things that are being discussed, and he has a small editorial where they give the media house or the editor sitting gives their thought or their view for that, and it is often accompanied by editorial cartoons. And then you have your letters to the editor. That's where we could also put a voice for ourselves in terms of what are we saying about what is topical, who are we writing to. This is still there, phased out a little bit now. There used to be some really interesting letters to the editor, not a very big feature, but still there. And then you have your international news, which are bought from the wires, AFP, BBC. AFP is the French agency for news. And then you have your BBC, you have your Reuters, which is big on giving us international news and what is happening abroad. Big story, of course, recently has been the inauguration, has been the ceasefire between Gaza and Israel, all of those. So we expect to see those in the international news section. Then you have your advertisements, you have your business section, you have your entertainment and lifestyle, you have sports. For each of these pages in the newspaper layout, you have an opportunity to appear in any of these sections depending on what your story is. And we can look at what those stories are. So let's go. Let's move to the next slide. The feature story. When you think about features, I don't know if we've heard of them. I'm sure all of us have read a feature story. What did you notice about features? What is your, what do you think, or do you remember what is memorable about features, or a feature you've read? Someone can share a memorable thing about a feature story that they have read or even shared somewhere, or somebody sent you a link to a feature story that was of interest to you. We just want one person, or please put it in the chat. Anything interesting about feature stories? Or tell us if you've been featured, you are the feature story for your newspaper, please. For the newspaper where you are, because I'm sure many of you are thought leaders in your areas of research. We'd want to hear what that, what is it called? What that process was like. Who has recently been featured in the newspaper? Anyone? Okay, Silence. Okay, so feature stories are popular content of print, electronic, and internet media. Feature stories are actually human interest articles that focus on particular people, places, and events. Feature stories are journalistic, they are researched, well-researched, they are descriptive in the way they speak about things, they are colorful, they are thoughtful. It's not just the news where I went to the opening of a science workshop. I know keynote speaker 1 said this, keynote speaker 2 said this, 3 said this. The event is happening at this venue, and will feature the following topics. It's not like that. It's thoughtful, it's reflective, and it is thorough writing about original ideas that are being put across. Next slide, please. So feature stories is it's different from the hard news. Okay, we've talked about daily deadlines, which are short, and then features take more time to prepare, they're longer. A feature story is not meant to report the latest breaking news, but rather it's an in-depth look at a subject. And feature articles range from the news feature that provides background to a current event, hard news story, and it also moves to a relatively timeless story that has natural human interest. So it has to have a background. Why are we doing this story? It is backgrounded by a current event, hard news story, if there's something that is happening there, and it will give you, it could also be a relatively timeless story with natural human interest. Now, I would like us to engage with this question. Look at your work and the things that you do. Look at the work and the things that you do. Please share with us what human interest, what a human interest feedback it has. Okay. When you think about your work and what you do, think about a feature story that you would sell to an editor. Mofokeng, you can share with us, please, and also background, and give us a background of what you do. Then you tell us what feature story you would want to sell to us from what you do.
Actually, I'm in education currently as an education specialist, and what we normally do is policy compliance, because in South Africa we are a country that has not been steeped in policy, background from time immemorial. I think from the white rule, there was never, that culture inculcated in schools to comply with the policy itself, and whatever that they are doing, they've got to infuse policy into their work and all those kind of things. So last year, obviously, there was a big storm about the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, which was then a bill, and it was opposed obviously by the white population. And you must also appreciate the fact that in South Africa, the white population it's a minority section of the population, but they've got a big voice, bigger than the majority of the people. They've got they can sway the news. They've got more impact simply because of the resources that they carry and all those kind of things. That area became a feature story for a very long time in South Africa, because actually it aimed at changing the landscape as to how education had to be administered and managed, and we find that the white population actually was not pleased by that change, which actually they realized that it was actually gonna impact negatively on what they have been used to, and the greatest part of their argument was culture, that their culture was very important, and the this Bella Act was intended to change their culture and so on. But when you check literature and how culture has been implemented across, generations and so on, you realize that it changes from time to time, given the material. But the white population wants to make it as if culture is a tradition that cannot change. You see, they want to impose it on every one of us, coming with a narrative of the day, and that's why it's quite an emotional issue, especially when you want to change education, or when you want to change the economic relations within the country, because that's where people now perceive their loss of resources, they perceive their loss of power. And these are the things that are quite more closer to their heart than any other thing. And that's basically South Africa, because it's divided along racial lines. But the funniest part is that the minority are the powerful ones, and the majority are the weak ones.
It's always the same everywhere. The politicians are the minority in every country, but they're the ones with the most say. So just before you go, Mofokeng, I just want to ask, would you be in a position, when you think about that, and we'll come to that a bit later, even as you think about this feature and this research and this issue that is so topical in your country, would you be in a position to actually offer your own insights based on the space where you are, based on policy that you support, or to support your office to begin becoming a sounding voice in a non-emotive manner, to counter or to give an alternative view to what is being peddled out there? Would you be in a position to do that now?
Maybe I can try in some few words, or not actually pondering too much on the subject, because it's a much more dicey situation, than people might think about, because it's a kind of, education in our country it's a tool that can disrupt family life. And that's why it becomes much more sensitive and emotional. But what we have intended to do was to write extensively in our internal media channels, explaining to other managers, education or school managers who read our articles and so on, and to feature more articles on different sections of the Act itself, as to how it should be implemented and so on. But we're also aiming at involving our MECs for education, member of the Executive Council in the legislature, to go to communities, call what we call people's indaba, where obviously it's a community platform where people can, vent out and maybe come up with some suggestions that can be considered and so on. I think it affords everyone to brainstorm and in a give and a take, give and take exercise and so on. So we have planned all those kind of things, and also the face-to-face workshops with our school principals, as well as the management teams of schools, so that at least, they can be what we call uniformity, application of uniformity across the landscape in our province.
Okay, thank you. You've mentioned two things. Thanks a lot for that idea, for the dialogue and what you're doing. You've mentioned two things. One is that you would want to continually write and talk about these things in the public media. And secondly, to your fellow teachers and to people who read the work that you do. So there's two things. You've talked about traditional media and working, sounding out and talking about the act and how it should be implemented. And secondly, you've talked about bringing together different thoughts and people. So when we come to the newsletter, I'm hoping that I can remember to just share this example of yours and use it to be able to see how we can even escalate this. Thank you very much. So Mulokozi Jackson said, this is a feature that was done in Uganda, an investigation in how caterers of bread and chapati are using transformer oil instead of cooking oil. So I don't know whether you're in the health industry or in the in industry, so that we can see how this investigation turned out. I would be curious, Jackson, would you have a minute to just tell us how that went and how does it work? I mean, how does it enter into your work? Does it feature in your work, or this is something you read? Jackson, are you open to sharing? Okay. Then Peter talks about trends in antimicrobial resistance patterns in Nairobi's informal settlement, reveal a growing public health threat, prompting scientists to explore alternative solutions, such as bacteriophages, to curb the spread of bacterial infections. Peter, do you have 2 minutes to tell us? Now, just remember, I am not science, so I want you to learn also how to use, I don't know whether all these terms were used in the article itself, but tell us in a brief way, what was the result of this, or what came out in this human interest story? And tell me that, and even if it wasn't told, you can also help me to see, use a person as a specimen A to tell me how this affects them. Would you be able to do that in 3 minutes? Peter Muturi?
Hello.
Hi, Peter.
Yeah, so I shared some of the work which we do, and we engage a lot with the communities in the informal settlement. And the trend that we see here, especially like in Kibera and Mukuru, we do a lot of work on typhoid, cholera, and so on. And sometimes you find that the antibiotics that that are used in these cases, they're really not working. Sometimes even the health workers don't know. So actually, we even try to have what we call the focus group discussion with the community, explain to them the risk of these infections, yeah, and so on. And then in some cases, we get some good feedback because you find these people, they're able to follow the guidelines, because sometimes we follow these up for some time. And in that case, we are having teams like in Cambridge who are trying to, because in the near future, or maybe by 2050, the issue of AMR, of antimicrobial resistance, will be even dangerous than COVID-19. So we are having a lot of people in the ground here trying to explore other alternatives to treat bacterial infections. This is a very let's say it's a big topic now with scientists in bacteriology, because the bacteriophages are viruses that infect bacteria, and having these now substitute antibiotics or being used at the same time with antibiotics, it's a big task ahead of us to convince these people and also to have these in our settings and so on and so forth. Yeah, so we have people trying to work with authorities because it's something new even in Africa, and making sure that the community understands, the authorities understand, like the Ministry of Health and so on and so forth. Yeah.
So Peter, if I was an editor, I would come to you. In fact, I already have my person A based on what you have told me. This is actually somebody I know whose child, every time she had a flu, she would put the child who is 4 years old on antibiotics. Okay, on antibiotics. So as you're talking about this resistance to, to this, is you think about it because you don't know where the thinking is. So as an editor, I'd come to you. I would ask to visit when you're doing these focus group discussions with the people. I want to listen to them. I want to listen to their views in terms of why they are choosing to do this, what is working. And then I'd follow you as a scientist to explain to me the dangers of what is happening. Okay. And then I would go to the ministry and hear from them how they are regulating the cell and the uptake of this some of these medicines outside. You know, there's medicine that needs to be regulated. I know in the West it's regulated more than here, where you cannot buy over-the-counter drugs. You have to have prescriptions. So I'd follow now the ministry to be able to hear from them on how they're regulating things like that. So I already have a feature story listening to what you're saying. Okay. And thank you for that. Thank you for those ideas. I hope I'm helping us to think about where we are, where we work, and what we can do with the research that we are doing out. So Peter, you need to support even with Kemri so that you can be able to see how you can put this as a story. It would be a very good feature story. It has all the components that I'm going to discuss in the next slide in terms of where we are going. So we are looking at the question between the feature versus the news story. And there's a question I'll answer on the chat about what's the difference between a feature story and a documentary. So in a feature story, which is different, is next slide, please. The writer has the time and the space to develop the theme. I don't need to attend a briefing in the morning where the president spoke or the Minister of Health spoke, and then in the afternoon by 3 o'clock, my editor is sitting and the subs are waiting for these stories, all right, or the sub-editors. So I have time to develop. I have time to follow Peter around. I have time to go to the community, to Mukuru, to Kibera with him. I have the time to do these things. So we have the time and the space to develop the theme, maybe 3 days, okay? Sometimes you postpone the main point of the story until the end, until we come up to a conclusion. And sometimes it can take time. It can take time in that I can come back 6 months later to complete my story and to say, based on the information and the training that was given to the community, we now see that the pharmacies, which is not good for them, are recording that there's less use or less purchase of drugs across the counter that are supposed to be, drugs that are supposed to be prescription. There's that. And then you can also see that people are adopting to better patterns of medical use. They're going to the clinic or whatever they're doing. And then it says the whole story does not have to be encapsulated in the lead. The lead is like the main 3 paragraphs. But the news story uses the inverted pyramid style, okay? It has the top, it has the main story, it has the lead, and then it goes next. The reporter makes the point, he sets the tone, and he frames the issue in the first paragraph or 2. You already know what that story is. In a feature story, I can already talk about Kibera. I can talk about how the people go to the store, what they buy, what they use. I'm not in a hurry to get you to the issue or what it is. Next slide, please. So let's look at the types of features we have, and we've already begun discussing one of them. This is a human interest story. It's the best known kind of feature story, the human interest story, and it discusses issues through the experience of another person, okay? So this experience, even just using that example of the people who are developing resistance to drugs and the challenges that it is posing for them. So we hear what would happen in that case if we backgrounded one person and how they've been abusing medicine or something like that. And we discuss this issue through the experience of one person. We've already answered the question on what would inspire human interest story. Okay, let's move to the next slide. Another type of feature is the profile. So in this profile, a very common type of feature, it reveals an individual's character and lifestyle. The profile exposes different facets of the subject, so readers will feel like they know the person. Now, I'm going to come back to us and say, for Peter, if I was to, because we've thought about now the work that he does in this area, so I'd want to interview him. Who is Peter Muturi? What does he do? What does he do in his free time? When he's not in Kibera or in the lab and looking at this research, what does he like doing? Where did he start? What attracted him to take up this career? That's what profiles do. Profiles do, and usually people are looking for people of stature, people with something to say, people who are admired by the community or society or have made an active contribution to it, or then are doing something that will make a difference. So Peter could invite me to go and cover his issue and this thing that he's doing, but I come to realize that this is actually an interesting person, or he tells me something and I realize you actually have an interesting personality, so let's feature you. Again, just think about what you do, your work, okay? Think about your work. Think about your colleagues, the people you work with in your office. I'd like somebody to share with us, 2 or 3 people to share with us, anybody you think who would inspire a profile and has not already been profiled. A profile, let's talk about person A, person B, person C. I'm inviting responses on the chat. You can put up your hand and tell me. You can even say, I think my story is inspiring. I would want to appear as a profile. So I'm looking for them, and that's what I'm telling you. Look around at your colleagues as well and think about what would make a good profile in your office if you were to profile someone. Who would you think within your context? And please tell us what that context is and who would inspire a good profile. Please put it on the chat. I'm looking forward to seeing different types. We are many people in this class. I'm sure we can have more. Looking forward to more interactions. In Africa, there used to be this old this thing that when I was growing up, it used to be on almost everybody's home plaque that used to say, Jesus is the unseen guest at every meal and the silent listener to every conversation. So I don't want silent listeners in this discussion, so that we all live when we've learned from you as well. That's what we are teaching you, to raise your voice. Anyone? Anyone who could share with us, anybody within your workspace who would inspire a good profile? Or a subject that you have interacted with in your time of research? Who would be a good profile? Who can we profile if we are doing a feature story now from this class? Would you prefer we discuss this in a breakout group? Do you think it would be more fun?
Can I come in there?
Yes. Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah. In my research field, when I started with Graduate Center for African Research, GCAR, which is it collaborates or works under the Sun Valley University in Zambia. I met one academic, Dr. King Costa. At the time was Dr. King Costa, and later on, I think 2 years after that, he became a professor. He's now a professor in coaching and mentoring. So I found the individual to have a high work ethic. High work ethic that is quite unbelievable. You know, he would sleep around 12 o'clock and wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and become too productive. I couldn't catch up with the kind of energy that the man had. He promoted about 30 students in a year. That was quite impressive. I mean, it's quite awesome, and the kind of articles that he had, you know, that he wrote, and also assisting us with our abstracts, you know, encouraging us to join the Asian Research Academy, where we discussed the methods, research methods, and all those kind of things. So he was all over the show in terms of exposing us to world platforms where we could present, you know, our abstracts and even our articles and so on. I must say, I doff my head to such an individual, and I think, you know, that his feature or feature article is long overdue, because he is making changes behind the scene, and in the country here, no one has ever got aware of the contributions that he has made, you know, the strides that he has conquered and all those kind of things. But I must say, well, simply because, you know, in South Africa, education does not have much of a value. That's why perhaps he has not been seen by now. But for me, I think he's quite of an individual who has left a very, very lasting impression, you know, in my life. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing that. Very enriching. I pick 3 things from him in terms of his work ethic. He's admirable. He's a person who has helped people, and I think in the field sometimes where we are is work is very individual. Work is very individual. You want to win. You want to be at the forefront. We sometimes we are not very open to sharing information. And someone like that who's not only opening up other channels where you can present your work, you can become a part of in terms of research, is one person who's admirable. I like that. And Mofokeng, thank you for sharing. And I'd give you also the challenge in that we have media houses. Probably you can get in touch through the emails or social channels of even somebody who's on YouTube who can be able to interview this professor, to be able to share his story and to see what he does. And it would be very enriching to hear from him, particularly the people who are in their 60s, 70s, and they have made significant contributions to society. I keep saying we are losing very many good Kenyans. This year we've lost some really great women of high stature who believed in ethics, which is slowly disappearing. People who were trailblazers in their industry. Many of them, 2 of them died suddenly, and amazing people, you know, and I don't think the outpouring of gratitude that has come up after they have passed on is something that they should have been allowed the opportunity to receive their flowers when they're alive. So I hope this profile makes it. I hope the profiles that you have that are enriching within your community, not only they might not appear in the mainstream newsletter, but when we talk about newsletters, work newsletters, these are the places where we can profile this kind of people. Community newsletters that speak about a certain profession or within your space of research. This is the place where you can write to the editor and they have their contacts and tell them, I think this is the kind of person that we need to share. So these are profiles. You also have sometimes newspapers, they have what they list as groups, and they say these are the top 40 individuals who've contributed a lot in business, in research, in sector. Highlight some of these young people who are under 40, or we top 50 business leaders. Highlight some of them and say, we think this person needs to be in the next year's profile because they have done that. That is what a profile does. The next slide, please. Another feature is the how-to feature. So this type of feature, it helps people by telling them how to do something. How do you do? The writer learns about the topic through education or experience or research or interviews with experts like yourself. A how-to, for example, would be a step-by-step, okay? A step-by-step in terms of how do you build a house from scratch? How do you think about, how do you put money in a money market fund and the difference between that and investing in fixed deposit assets in the bank and things like that? How do you carry out research? What is the process of carrying out your research? How do you do the, so there's how to things for many things, okay? Again, think about your work, give an example of what you would aspire, how to like, what would you sell to us in terms of, I know, and I'm become an expert in this area, the people who are talking about climate change, how do you read, how do you understand climate change 101, AI 101, okay, AI in education 101, how do we do these things, okay? That is the how to feature. Let's take the next one, a historical feature. Historical features, and I love history, I'm a student of history, I love to write. My preference is to tell old stories. Okay, I had a colleague at the Sunday Times in Johannesburg who used to call me Miss Old News because that's the project I was doing. So historical features commemorate important dates in history or turning points in social, political, and cultural development. They offer a useful juxtaposition of the then and now. They take the reader back to revisit an event and issues surrounding it. I want you to think about a context, and I'll give you an example. The gentleman who spoke about the release of the murder of Chris Hani, a historical feature at that point, because the key story is the release of Chris Hani's killer. A historical feature would take us back to where Johannesburg was or South Africa was at that time when Chris Hani was killed, okay? What happened, the riots that followed, and how it changed the context of the country. Think about your space or where you're in. I want you to think, but this one I want responses. Think about your work and give an example of what would inspire a historical feature. I'll give you another example from Kenya. Let me give you a global example, 9/11, okay? 9/11 is, so every September we celebrate or we commemorate 9/11. One of the things that has been repeatedly discussed is how travel changed after 9/11. How is it still changing? What attitudes towards the security in the United States are being made improvements now that take us back to 9/11 and what happened there. When you commemorate that, and there's a special issue in the newspapers, even as much as in Kenya, even if it didn't affect us, there's usually a feature. Maybe somebody will say, this is where I was, or what happened to the world about that. So I want you to share with us the work that you do, what would inspire a historical feature around the work that you're doing? What would inspire that? Please share with us on the chat. Please lift your hand. Let's have voices that have not spoken. This is your chance to let your organization shine, so that you give us something that would inspire a historical feature. Is your organization turning 100 years, 50 years? Does it have a seminal time? What would inspire a historical feature within your working space? Anyone? I'll wait for an answer for this one. Anyone? I've already given 2 examples. Please, let's hear your comments, your feedback. Okay, we will think about it when we go into the breakout rooms for the next discussion. We can probably share some of those, but I'd really be interested in hearing about what you would do to commemorate. You also have annual ones. So we'll go to Mofokeng again. He's sharing an example with us because we haven't had anybody else volunteer. Thank you.
Yes. I think this year, you know, our education department, the provincial one, will be turning 35, and looking at all the great things that this department has achieved and did in those years. I think we can be able to mention a lot of things in terms of policy changes that were effected then. You know, educational trends like educational symposiums that we used to have, you know, celebrations of Teachers' Day, you know, Africa Day, and so on, and some of the achievements, you know, that came about as a spin-off from such kind of an activities, like the people who got promotion and left the department and make some waves wherever they landed up, and so on. The ones, or great ones, who actually retired, went on retirement, the ones obviously who succumbed to COVID-19 and all those kind of things. I think, you know, it can trace out, you know, the history, the track record that we have surmounted, you know, in those 35 difficult years that we tried to put the education at the cutting edge of the nation in our province, and so on, and so that, you know, then people can wonder as to if those are the things that could be mentioned to have happened and achieved in that time. What is it that needs to be done now? Because we find that all those kind of things are no longer done, because now in our country there is a big elephant in the room, you know, that is called financial, you know, they've got a term that they use, that you can no longer spend. I think it's a financial term, but I'll remember it as time goes on. Fiscal discipline. Yes, they call it fiscal discipline. Because of fiscal discipline, we can no longer do some of the programs that we used to do in the past and so on. But then what we realize is the fact that there becomes a communication gap very, very wide to transverse between communities that are being served by the department, as well as the officials who need to bring information, because sometimes it's not possible for one person to, to cover, say, 2,000 people, service them and so on. And as such, such kind of things, when they happen, then there is lot and lots of disorder that happens in schools. Then you find that children are no longer as disciplined as they used to before, and so on. The morale of the teaching corps is going down because most of them don't know how to manage certain issues that are new to their environment, keep on coming and so on. Because I mean, really, life is changing, so fast. In a day, many things are being discovered by our children, and as adults, we are unable to cope up with how to manage and control what they are doing. And
thank you.
And that brings a lot of uncertainty in our lives.
Yes, you've ended with a personal anecdote, and that's true. I think it's easier, like you're talking about the education issue back then, if you even think about how they managed and how schools are managing now. So you've given different analyses. You've talking about the institution itself. We've talked about people who've been there, people who've passed on in those 35 years, people who've moved on. And it would be interesting, I mean, to see and to share once this document is done and once you finished documenting this, this document that you would do to commemorate the 35 years, and keeping also records or namesakes, whether it is online or if it's going to be physical copies for future people. When the organization turns 50, 15 years later, you will have a document to turn to. And a lot of people here, you yourself, maybe others within this space, are carrying institutional memory. Before you go and you have those, you remember how it was 20 years ago before we moved from Office A to Office B, when we were just staff of 5 people. Now we are 100 people in the office. You carry these memories with you. I do know that in my previous work, we used to commemorate people who've been with the organization 20, 25, 30 years, and they're put on camera and they talk about how it was. It seems so far-fetched because you were so much younger then, and you can talk about this. I'm going to invite Eric, but there's a question here. Jackie is saying, when you're talking about historical features, I don't know if we can talk about the historical evolution of the fight against outbreak diseases in health, especially one like cholera, for example. That's an excellent idea. And this one, you can even talk about it, because if you're the expert and if you have that, working with citing in that specific country where you are, and you know the gains that have been made, you need to talk about this. You need to talk about the mortality rates back then. You need to talk about what has come up. You need to talk about whether there has been government intervention. You need to talk about the medical. You need talking about that. So this is really, this is it. This is what we are saying. You think about yourself and you've thought about your work and you said, let's talk about the fight against outbreak diseases. Now there's World Global Day for Cholera. Pitch this to an editor. Tell them, I have information and I have data. I can give you a historical background about this. In organization, the records we have, this is how we used to keep things. Learn to use your archives if you have them for the office and be able to speak about them. Eric, please, your hand was up. I was just responding to this question. Would love to hear from you also on this. what I'm sure you had something to say. So Jackie, please get on it, write something. And even if you don't have a media, talk about it. And that's why I say use your LinkedIn profiles. You have such a great voice to be able to talk, and people will be like, oh, this is the way things were. We don't know what you know, and we want to hear it. Eric, you had your hand up. I'd love to hear what you had to contribute.
Good morning. Okay, this is Eric Prono. So my key work that I've done, I think, in iHealth services. There's a project that is being implemented by African Health Ministries and Christian Blind Mission on trying to prevent avoidable blindness in 8 counties in Kenya. So I had a privilege of participating in these exercises as screener. So from my point of view is that I've been able to visit, as a screener, I've been able to visit, I think, around 4 sub-counties, going from one household to another, trying to screen for the common eye health conditions, be the refractive errors, in this case, the short-sightedness, other conditions, for example, the cataract. So there, as the history will be written, I've participated actively in referring the cases. After screening now, we refer to a treatment site, a treatment outreach, whereby they come to manage these conditions. So from my point of view, I've been able to move from one household to another in Meru County and referring these health
county,
cases.
sorry?
Meru County. Yeah, so I've been able to screen now from one household to another and refer these cases now to be managed in the health facility. Because now this is a system whereby you screen, you refer, and they're being attended. So many people have been treated, and some have been surgically intervened for those with cataract. I've been able to also to identify cases, for example, glaucoma. Glaucoma is the pressure of the eye. And other cases, for example, the inflammation of the eye, that's what we do call the red eye. So it's part of some of the work that I've been able to do as a screener, moving from one household to another, finishing the location, the village, the location, to another sub-county. So I think this is some of the work, though it's not yet due, but it's one part of that. We can be able to improve access to high health care services, and it was a free services. So I think those are some of the work that I've been able to do. Also, another thing that inspires me is I have had access to training that was trained by National Research Group Nigeria. They train us on artificial intelligence and climate change. So I've been able to carry out a little bit of trying to model using a random forest. In that case, a random forest application model is it's a machine learning language. So I've been able to code some of model for climate change. I was able to code a climate change model for Nairobi County. I shared a blog on that. So I was able to code and share my findings to that a blog article, and wrote on that in National Research Hub Nigeria. So through that, I think I was able to have a good experience on that. So they wrote that. So those are some of my small work that I'm being able to do. Thank you.
So thank you, Eric, for sharing that. When I listen to you, I'd be curious in terms of as an editor, I'd be curious to ask, when you do your research, what are you finding? Are you finding in terms of, because you're doing screening as part of this project, you've gone to the community, are you finding that people are surprised when you screen and you find that, oh, they have a need for eye intervention, for medical intervention for their eyes? Are you finding it among the elderly, among the young people? What are you finding? What are some of the, and David points to it, what are some of the cultural nuances you find when you're looking at these interventions. Are people welcoming? You think about that. When you talk about now feedback from a community like this, and I know a lot of your reports come out from these communities or from this work with statistics. You have numbers. We had we sampled 500 residents. We went to these houses. This was the area we took. Out of this, 100 had glaucoma. This had this numbers. This had this feedback to that. At the same time, so this is what you do. You have your stats, you have your graphs. Then you talk about the interventions. We intervened. Our doctors did intervention A, B, and C. In your report, I would want you to go a little further when you're doing your report with the statistics and numbers, and give the person doing the report a personal story that touched you from that community. A young child, you intervened maybe for a grandmother who did not even know she
It seems Miss Anne is experiencing a technical issue. It's being fixed, but in the meantime, I'm going to put the D2 attendance list in the chat. Feel free to write your names as you'd like to appear in the certificate, as well as the evaluation form. Thank you. You're speaking on mute.
Sorry, my apologies. We lost power. I was trying to hotspot on my phone. Sincere apologies. And it just got cut off like that. So yes, hopefully I'm back now. At least my phone is working. That is the technology for you. Yes, so let me just move on because we are due for a break soon in terms of what we are discussing on features. But I like that we have now begun thinking about what you can do with features in your organizations. And I like that the historical feature has prompted you. And there are people who are coming up with lots. I mean, one or two of you has talked about the challenge and the issue with antimicrobial resistance, you need to talk about that thing if you're not talking it about. And you need to go onto the podcasts, you need to go, there's so many ways of talking about these things. And people are keen on engaging. You know, we can talk as a TCC, you can write to the, to the organizers, or you can find me, and we can see ways in which this then can become something. Somebody also asked, what was the difference, before I move on, the difference between a feature and a documentary? Documentaries, as you see, are mostly made for visual, for TV. So it is actually your feature, but viewing. So it's made for TV, it's made for, you can do a documentary even for sharing on your phone, on your apps or something like that, but it is longer. It just, documentaries have to have a script or a storyline that is told and that is created, but a feature is just written. You don't have to think. A documentary, you have to plan beforehand. You have to say, this is what we want to do. This is the outcome. This is where we are starting. This is where we will film. This is what you will do. The difference is, one is talking about what is happening now, and it doesn't have like a future evidence, but a documentary, because you're following, there's a message you're passing, but with a sequence. And most likely you'll need somebody to give the direction for how that sequence is going. And then of course it goes through the editing process, and then you have your documentary for film, for TV, for an online audience, for a news story, even news documentaries, they have to go through a sequence. So that is the difference between between those discussions. All these things that you're discussing, I want you guys to be able to output them. And that's why I'm saying, look at your pages and even discuss amongst one another. Somebody else, I think if I remember, because the chat has gotten lost, was asking the question, about where do we find these profiles of, where do we find the places to profile? You think about your audience and you do your research in terms of your media research for who is writing. We have a few magazines in Africa that cut across, some that actually profile high-level individuals. Unfortunately, they are really looking for high net worth individuals that they can talk about. So they'll talk about if you're the leaders in these industries that they are doing. But we have places where we can we can talk about features. You can even look for a journalist who just is a blogger and he covers personalities and interviews. We have many for Kenya, but I'm sure in your countries where you are, you also have you also have those ones. So next, the next slide, please. So another feature is behind the scenes. This is, I won't belabor on this. It's inside views of unusual occupations, the issues and events. The readers like feeling privy to unusual details and well-kept secrets about procedures or activities they might not ordinarily be exposed to or allowed to participate in. If you look at, if you watch documentaries, like we've discussed, documentaries or television shows that talk, that probably feature what is it called? The most exclusive resorts to stay in. How do they look? How do they do their laundry? How do their managers check that the table is clean? How do they do that? Or you look around behind the scenes in CEO's day, starting at home. You know, the CEO is interviewed, how he eats his breakfast, how he goes to the gym in the morning. Almost all of them do exercise. Isn't it interesting? I don't know whether that happens on a daily basis. So behind the scenes really takes you behind the thinking to that. What is a behind the scenes in your, in your office? When you think about what is behind the scenes, like I kept saying yesterday, our whole point in the place where we work is to make sure that everybody who works with you is aware or has some sort of knowledge about what you do. If the intern who's coming to do research for a period of 3 months, brief him, take interest in those young people. You know, you can change someone's life because you invested yourself in somebody for 3 months. So you ask him at the beginning, what do you think we do, what we do? They probably just passed the internship interview by a whisker in terms of knowledge about the organization. And you know, these Gen Zs, they don't even like to research. They come for your interview and they tell you, I don't know much about the organization. So the ones that pass through, At the end of the 3 months, ask them, what do you know about our organization now? Okay, you've given them a behind the scenes. Maybe their work is actually just recording the data that you bring to them or you bring before them. Maybe they're the ones who are doing the informant interviews out there. But sit down with them at the end of them and ask them, so what do you know about our organization? Or midway, what have you learned about this organization? Take them behind the scenes. This is how the research desk looks like. This is how, this is how it works. If it's a difficult concept, ask them, what have you learned about this? How does it apply to your daily living? This is what we're talking about behind the scenes. Take a behind the scenes feature or look on something that you've never been interested in. You all have insurance policies in the office. By God's grace, if you work for a good organization, they have a health insurance policy for you. What goes into thinking of that process? And sometimes you're privy to it, but sometimes you're not. So ask HR, how do you make these decisions for us? Many of the times, yes, they will come and they say, after 2 years, we want to renew this contract. These are the available providers. You have meetings and discussions, town halls in the offices, and then at the end they choose. But you need to, there are some other things that you ask, how do you arrive at this? How do you arrive at this computation? How do you arrive at those? Are behind the scenes. We want to see how you do things behind the scenes. The next one. So when you're writing feature stories, and this is for those now who will be bringing us this information, okay? When we are writing feature stories, the power of the feature story lies in its ability to amplify the focus on an issue through fast-rate storytelling, irony, humor, human appeal, atmosphere, and colorful details. Okay, so they have to have a bit of that. They have a clear beginning, they have a middle and an end, and we say they're longer than hard news. The writer's opinions and attitudes are not important to the story. If I'm writing this story about Eric's work in Meru, what I think about him or what I think about his process is not necessary. I'm supposed to write what he's telling me, his story, where he's consulted, what he has done. I need to keep myself out of that story, okay? And it always has a news peg or a news angle, okay? And writing in the third person will help you to maintain the necessary distance. That's what I was encouraging him. Find somebody in that village or an experience, or how you slept on the road one of those days because the last mile between one village to the next was not there or was not available. That is how you write. You write in third party about someone, about something, really about yourself. Now you're telling your general story, and most likely I'm not going to write about myself unless I'm writing about an experience as a writer where I went in a place. But a feature story will be about somebody else and not about yourself. The next slide, please. And how do you begin? How do you begin? By writing that story. You use 3 tools to gather information. Observe. That's why I said, what did you see that was peculiar? What did you eat in Meru that you've never eaten? These things that they talk about this community, what surprised you? Did you find Mira eating people? How do the men work with the women? What are some of the cultural setbacks that you had to jump through, hurdles that you had to back through? And then you're interviewing, you're talking to somebody when you're doing the interview and the background research. And then after you complete this and you have all your tools, the writer will bring the story to life through your colorful description, your meaningful anecdotes. That's where we put in the quotes, and what we remember. A funny thing, I saw a donkey, and this donkey was peculiar because it was XYZ in the course of that. Sometimes you're not storytellers, as I'm saying, but let's learn to observe beyond the work that has taken us there. It will enrich the way we tell stories, even as you do your presentation. When you're doing your presentation and you're talking about your markers, you're talking about what you've done, it's important to say, these were some of the things that we encountered in the community. You even have a photo. We love the slides. I remember when we used to send people out to the field to talk to the community before we do interventions there. They'd always bring back these funny pictures, of course, now, photos also have ways in which you're doing, the normal photo, don't bring photos of children showing faces without their permission. These days, you need to have signed consent forms when you're taking people's photos, even in the community. Otherwise, you'll be sued if you have not received consent, even from the village elder. Sometimes it's easy to do that. So as we say, significant quotes, put them in your story. These elements are obtained when interviewing and observing everything: the smells, the noises, the colors, the textures, the emotions. What details did you see and had in the surroundings? We recently watched a screening of documentaries that were done in Gaza by filmmakers who they are actually trained filmmakers, but because of since that October conflict 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, when it began, they surrendered because most of them were bombed and things like that. So now they were making videos with their cameras, and the screening has actually been shortlisted for this year's Oscars, and it's called From Ground Zero. And one of the things that was constant was the sound of the drones overhead. And there were many questions after that screening, because it was to a small group, about the sound of that drone. So are you listening? Are you observing these things when you're in that community where you're doing your research? And then we always say, keep an open mind when interviewing the subjects and when researching the sources that you need for that. So we also use illustrations when you're doing your reports or your stories. This is in media. The illustrations, they can be photographs. I said photographs always enhance, even your own report. Just make it heavy scientific text. Punctuate the beginning of your first chapter or your first part of the report with a story from the community, okay? Use photographs or art. The art can be drawings, they can be painting, sketches, they can be video or machinima, colorful graphs and charts. Use this to break the reading and other creative expressions, depending on the medium for which the feature is packaged, is packaged for dissemination, and how we are able to do that. Okay, so now we are going to take a 10-minute break. It's 10:53 on my time. You can count 3 hours backwards or 3 hours forward so that we come to the next presentation. I'm just going to ask Kevina to give us direction on how long we need to take a break, so that then we move for the next 2 hours and plan to end at 11. And plan to end at 1. Kevina, are we okay to take a break?
Yes, a 10-minute break will be sufficient. So as you said, we'll resume in the next 10 minutes.
Okay, let's come back at 5 minutes past.
11:05.
Yeah, 11:05 is good. Thank you.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's take a health break. Grab water, coffee, whatever you need, so that we can, and stand up so that we can refresh for the next session. Thank you. It could be an idea that you're putting forth, and then you have a question. Somebody asked, starting with a question, So what do we do after we have done the introduction? How do we proceed once you have put in the introduction? You include information as to why you're writing a story. Remember, this is a feature. Include the news in your feature article, which will most likely be information from a previously written hard news story. The news meaning the key point, the facts, not the colorful language now, the facts in the article that you previously have borrowed from a written hard news story. Provide plenty of background information in the feature article because you're expanding on a news angle. You use quotes, especially early in the article, to establish a good reader or source relationship. A quote is someone said something, okay? So you introduce, even if you're writing about that community that you're doing research on antimicrobial resistance. When you write that, you talk about somebody from the community said, what did we see? We are seeing, I'm giving my son the same medicine all the time. He falls ill, but he's not getting better after every 2 weeks. That's a quote. Then you quote from the researcher. You say, what is the researcher seeing or saying? Those are quotes, okay? We see that newspaper features are often between 500 words to 2,500 words in length, okay? So as you can see, it's longer. Magazine features are usually 500 to 5,000 words. If you read magazines, okay, New African, the African, if you read Time, if you look at Economist and things like that, you're looking at articles that sometimes span 2 to 3 pages, so they can be anywhere between 500 to 5,000 words. Features on websites and blogs generally range from 250 to 2,500 words. And why that word count is because people online are less able to, to keep scrolling up. The time span and the attention that is given on websites and blogs is definitely smaller than if you're reading a hard copy of a magazine or a newsletter. But when it's captivating, which is what we hope to do, is you actually get a good word count on that. So this is what we are saying. After the introduction, just keep including the information, provide the background, and use quotes to strengthen your feature article. Now we move to newsletters, and we spoke about newsletters. A lot of the things that we've said here, even talking about that historical information, like if you're celebrating your institution or talking about some of those things that we have discussed, a newsletter is the best place to present what it is that we're talking about, especially if it's institutional or it is within your area of expertise and you have newsletters. You have newsletters from parent donors, you have newsletters from research institutions you follow, you have institutional newsletters. So what does a newsletter do? Okay, have you ever written for your newsletter, even within the office? Do you even know that your office has an online newsletter that they send, that is sent as either written on MailChimp or one of those, and it is distributed to partners, to donors, to interested parties? Have you ever written for it? And do you think it's hard to write for a newsletter? And if so, what are the issues? So the newsletter is the paring knife of communication tools. It may seem easy, but it is easy to take it for granted. So you're told, okay, you in this office, you are the chief researcher. Please write us an article about XYZ. It's your area of expertise, you know what to do. You'll just put out the stats there. But for it to actually have some of the components we talked about when doing writing, either for a feature, editorial, we need to follow those guidelines. And if it's handled well, it's a highly capable tool of distribution. That is the newsletters from anywhere. Sometimes I support the editing of a newsletter that speaks about an education fund. And these newsletters, you have to think, they have to think about what's going to be in the next edition. How are we going to write about these students? How are we going to dignify them? How are we going to talk about their desires? How do we humanize this research that we are doing? Okay, yeah, it is XYZ, it is all our charts, it is our graphs, it is all this work we've done in the lab, but how do we bring a human face even to what we are writing, even in your presenting, when you're presenting your information and putting data out there, what it is can you use to humanize even those presentations? So for the newsletter, which is more accessible, I think of all these kinds of writing for a newsletter would be the most accessible to you. You may not have thought about it, but think about it and have discussions in your office. Do we have an office newsletter? If you do not know about it, do we have a newsletter in this area of expertise? If you Google hard enough or you ask with your peers, you should be able to find an answer to that. And you'll find actually there's a newsletter that you can write for within your area of expertise. How do we write? Okay, we follow the inverted pyramid where you have your lead, give it few words. It's the most important newsworthy information. Make it succinct to the point, including as many of the 5 W's, which is the who, the what, the where, the how, and the when. Okay, have a bright quote in it, the best quote with best summary or best evidence of conflict. You have the following paragraphs, which is 6 to 12 paragraphs. It provides mini article establishing the main facts of the story and answers questions raised by the lead. So the lead will tell you why we are here, and then this is how we got here, which is followed in the next paragraphs. Okay, this is the body. The body is structured on topical sections using idea evidence, like the quotes, the point counterpart, what the challenge was, or what somebody else has said, or evidence has shown contrary in this and this area about that. So these are the details for the most interested reader. So remember, in this inverted pyramid, the information we are giving is in descending order of importance. So if by the first 5 paragraphs, you've not given it your punch, you've not detailed your reason for writing, you've not said why you're doing it, then remember, you're slowly losing your readers in that, okay? And then at the end, you need to have a conclusion, okay, about why you're doing, why you're doing that. And then, of course, you said in the format, it answers the 5 whys, which is important, the 5 W's and the H. What are we discussing? What are we speaking about? Who is part of this discussion? Where did it happen? When did it happen? Give it timeline, give it a context. Why did it happen? And how did it happen the way it did? So this is the format we follow, the 5 W's and the H in all kinds of writing. In fact, even for you who have students, you will require them to do this. Students in high school, in your homes who are doing this, they'll need to answer the essay format in that area. When we're doing newsletter writing, we keep our strategic audiences in mind, okay? What is relevant to them? What is important? Remember, a newsletter is not a general piece of writing. It is not like the newspaper that goes out to everybody who will pick that 100 shillings and buy a newspaper. You're having a strategic audience. That's why I asked, are there newsletters within your area of expertise you can contribute to? It's written for a certain audience in mind. What is relevant to this audience? What is important? Remember that good writing and good editing requires direction and hard work. Remember also that when you're editing, you have your own editing tools in your computers, okay? These days, there's everything from Google AI to Microsoft AI, all of them are there, okay? Make sure your work is edited before you present it even to the editor, okay? Because as a good scientist, if you bring to me copy, I will look at you as the head of your communication section, and I'll say, this is our chief researcher, but there are things he has written here, I'm not sure this is English, okay? So let's have good copy that is sent out already, where they already know this scientist, we don't even need to read much or to change, because he has good copy. So it requires direction and hard work. Your copy should sing rather than drown. This should have been drowned. It should ring when it is tapped, meaning it should flow easily. Flow easily. It just carries itself. The copy, this person said they did, they what? This is what we found, the evidence. Then it says the bottom line is your readership. Give your readership top priority. Like I said, you have a certain audience in mind when you're writing for a newsletter. Think about them when you're writing these newsletters. And in your newsletter, your article should not be more than 700 words, unless it is requested. 700 to 1,000 words is an ideal word count for a newsletter, because you're not trying to solve the world's problems with this one article. Think about your tone and your attitude when you're writing for newsletter. Next slide, please. Every program or project has its own tone and manner, which is adapted to various contexts. Now, this is you, your program, your project, you have your language. Make sure it's in there. Make your newsletters tone, personal and casual. People want to see a little humanity behind the program. No matter how challenging your area is, even if it is in the area of nuclear physics, there has to be a way you can humanize this physics, in the way you speak, because you're a human yourself. This is just your work. This is your expertise. This is what you have learned and taken years honing of experience, but let's humanize it. So it should be casual. It should be scientific, but casual, because if you're writing for a scientific audience, your science has to come out. But we also want to see a little humanity behind the program. And then if when you're sending out these newsletters, because you do, your comms people do it, your, what is it called? Maybe the personal assistant to your director has the key people that this newsletter is sent to. Maybe it's sent to the donors. Maybe it's sent to representatives of various embassies in the country where you live. So you have to create a relevant subject line, okay, for this person you're writing, you're writing for. Why do we need a relevant subject line? Why should it be there? And the answer is simple. There's a lot of email junk that people have to filter through. You need to capture their attention. Okay, by the time you send me an email, I don't know who you are. I don't know why you're writing to me. Just have it in the caption. The only emails that sometimes we don't put subject lines are the ones we are copying to ourselves or we are writing to ourselves. You know, where you blind copy yourself and you can't blind copy to other people. If you're writing yourself an email or something that is a reminder, you can leave it without a head or a subject line. People are looking for an excuse to delete your newspaper. So don't give them one. Don't give them an excuse. Have a catchy subject line when you're sending out your email so that people can read this newsletter that you have taken so much time to think about. Now we go to what is called an opinion editorials. And like I said, a lot of you are actually what is it called? Your authorities within your area of work, within what you're doing. Okay, so this is one area in which we are going to think about how we can work. So an opinion editorial is a piece that presents an informed view on a newsworthy topic, and it emphasizes the author's insight and unique expertise. Not everybody writes op-eds. It's not everybody. They are opinion pieces, but they are facts, they are statistics. You're writing about what you think about that education board that has changed the policy and how this policy is going to affect the people. This is what I think, okay? But I'll give you the following facts. You need anecdotes to help you show up the argument and to lend the color. In this area of district XYZ, okay? Students in this Nini have reduced maybe their learning, you know, or we have seen dropout, such and such percentage of dropouts in that area of school because of XYZ. Then you put your argument across as far as that is concerned. So we need anecdote to help us to show up the argument. Address one subject at a time. Is it a social commentary you're making? Is it a cultural commentary you're making? Is it political interest? Okay, is it political interest? They are all welcome. Just because you're a researcher doesn't mean that you can't write about your country's historical celebrations. Just because you're an author in the field of science, biochemistry, okay, doesn't mean that you can't talk about your food practices within your community and what you like about them. Because of science, you can even introduce that science in the way you think or what you have seen as an attitude in your community and talk about it. Talk about food practices, why you think our food practices are informed by the way we do. It's not science, but it's an opinion. You're an expert in whatever area you are, and you have the opportunity to talk about that. Talk about AI. This is what I have found. I work with students. This is their attitude towards learning, okay? They want simple things. They want things like this. This is why artificial intelligence is going to become the next big thing in whatever it is. So where do we write op-eds? Op-eds are written, they're actually opposite the editorial page. Okay, in an A4 format, usually we have between 3 and 4 op-eds that are carried within any specific newspaper, or 2 of them, it depends. I know the most has always been 4 because you can divide the page into quarters or into 3 where the top opinion takes the most time, then these other 2 are divided. Think about an A4 paper and how that looks. So op-eds are written by regular columnists and guest opinion pieces, and you become that guest opinion, or you become a guest so well that they actually give you a column for an op-ed every week or every so good, so something like that. So any of these editorials can be is welcome. You can be, and encourage you at least this year. Tell yourself, my writing target is I'll write an op-ed in the newspaper this year about any topic. It will be well researched, it will be brief, I will have my ideas put out, and I will. Media is always looking for good op-eds from good people, from people in fields they don't know. There's a lot of social commentary. There's very little op-eds we are reading from researchers and people in the field of science, and we want that from you. And we said it's normally between 750 to 800 words. Peter asks, good information on writing a newsletter, does it also apply when writing an institutional bulletin? That's true. They are more or less the same. Newsletter, institutional bulletin can be the same. Remember, they are all for targeted audiences, and they could be, others call them different names, but yes, it's the same thinking that you're doing. Remember your audience, think about it. Is it the donor? Is it, am I writing for the students? Am I writing for our global heads? Where does this newsletter go? How far is it sent to? So you think about that as you're writing even for that institutional bulletin. So that is that. And if you've never written for one, this is the year to do that. So let's go to the next slide on the op-eds. So this one, I want us to break into groups. I don't know whether, Kevina, we are able to do the breakout groups just like yesterday, just for about 15 or 20 minutes. Are we able to do the breakout groups today?
Yes, we are.
Sorry?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so this is our discussion for today. Okay, what is topical and being covered in the news related to your work? So we are merging all these ideas, okay, about hard news, features. We are merging even institutional bulletin. I want you to talk about what is topical and that is being covered in the news related to your work. It gives you more time to discuss what we have been talking about today. And then I want you to give me, just like you would in an opinion, okay, in your group, what is your professional opinion on it? This is where I want you guys to exchange ideas. And because we have so many professions represented here that we won't know, and I'll be listening in, hopefully in the groups. So we'll divide into groups and we'll do this discussion. What is topical in your area of work? What is being covered, okay? And what is your professional opinion on it? So Kevina, if you can help us with those breakout groups, I will appreciate. And please discuss in your groups. Find a moderator. Will only be about 15, 20 minutes so that we have a few people talking, and then also somebody who will report back to plenary. Thank you, those who are here. We're just waiting for the others to come back, to log back in. Okay, I think we are almost all back. Thank you so much. I think one of the key things about, since we're not able to see one another, is these discussions help us to know where we are, to help us to know who is in here, who we can collaborate with, and what we are doing. Who can we co-author, co-write with? Those who are asking about African magazines, how do we pitch? And I give you the example of these two journalists who are working across the East and the Western Africa divide, to be able to find that we have similar problems and challenges. How can we answer them? So we'll invite feedback from the groups. We can share one or two things that we have learned from each other that we have, so that we can also hear from each other, since we've been able to talk to smaller sample groups, and we listen out to what is being covered and your own opinions on what is, on what is happening. And then you can see, and I hope you've been able to think about how you can churn this into topics that you can speak about on any forms of the media that we have discussed today. Over to you, the first group. Did you have anyone from group one who's willing to share what, just in summary, what you've discussed, one or two points?
So my name is Collins and I'm representing my group. So the topic that we were discussing is on the impact of the US withdrawal from the World Health Organization, as well as pausing of the USAID funding. So we've discussed that this has will have detrimental effects, especially in critical sectors such as health and food. And particularly in terms of health, we've discussed about it will largely affect the HIV and AIDS programming, which now were largely funded by the programs such as the PEPFAR. So in terms of my colleagues' opinions, one of my colleagues think that this was quite a rash decision, and maybe there could be wide consultations to see how best this can be done. Then we also discussed that as Africa, maybe we need to open our eyes. We need to rethink, maybe start with, maybe go back to the traditional way of medicine, do some research. Which ways can we develop our own medicine that we can rely on? Can we also rethink how we can fund our critical sectors, such as health, education, on our own without relying on external aid? Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Collins, and your group. That really is a critical area of funding. Those are some of the things that you can come up with, and even as recent as this week, if possible, just write what your feedback is. Remember, the feedback doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be aggressive. It doesn't need to be emotive in thought, but just to look at, even if you're looking at one area, like you're saying, that can be critically challenged by this stopping of this funding, it doesn't mean that we will do anything about it or that the US will listen to us, but it just means that we have put our points across, because sometimes that's just it. You're sounding a voice and you're saying that it will have great impact on this. So thinking about those areas, keep thinking about ways you can channel what you're thinking into active writing or publication about it, and see. In fact, on this area, I'd actually give you a challenge and tell you, think about the areas that have been funded by these projects, the tangible projects, especially the ones that touch the communities, and challenge you to think about from now on, okay, you stop the funding now, what happens? Is there a downslide of these communities? So that you also have fact and data that you have when you're going back. And if it is reintroduced after 3 months, what was the gap? What did we find in those 3 months? How did we cope? How did we cope now that the project has to run, okay? Or we cannot leave these mamas alone. They probably are receiving a stipend where we are carrying out the research in things like this. So what happens to them? I would also say this would be some of the interesting stories that we can begin thinking about now, so that we look at the trends and the challenges. When the funding is reintroduced, we can write something about it. And remember, we have background to now, then you will even have carried out a story. So think about some of these things. Thank you very much, Collins, and your group 2, or the.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. I'm Henry David Bayo, presenting on behalf of the group 2, where we have different members from, I think, different countries who participated, and also from different fields. But however, the professions are related. So key with regards to the question on the topical and being covered in the news related to our work, first, the issue of water resource, which is also topical. And we know the impacts on communities, looking at the demand for water. It's been a critical challenge. So this affecting also communities as well. So there is also a challenge, and which needs really to be covered, and people needs to be informed, development partners to come on board to see how those problems could be solved. Yeah. So there's a need for research, how communities are affected, what's the impact, and also publishing those information, and then get support, because data informs the plan and also key projects as well. Then another area is climate change, which is also connected to water resource. Yeah, it's also topical, and water resource, the nexus between climate change and water resource has taken global concern. Well, for climate change, it's not only water resource, but also other key sectors as well, how it's affecting. But key at the center is how people are being affected, the impact on communities. Yeah, so also that needs research, that needs a lot of publications, information, news to inform people about how it is affecting people, or how people are adapting or coping, or changes that is happening. Yeah. So basically, these are the key areas we covered: the issue of water resources and that of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Those are very insightful areas that touch and border on human interest stories, areas that have a tangible, what is it called? Tangible support. Somebody just forwarded to me this week, I think a grant that is being given, I need to remember which organization it is, to enable people who are looking at stories in the area, I think, of water resource, dwindling water resources. I think it was from the National Geographic Organization. So you can go to their website and see what that is, so that they can look at some of the challenges and this grant making. You need to learn as a researcher, then how you can work with media on board, so that you can do documentaries and be able to bid for those. And if you're actually a research media team, you can do amazing things and you can do wonders with that kind of money because you have the technical expertise and the background. You're able to figure out what the challenges are in terms of the technical bit. And then you just go with a filmmaker or somebody who's willing to run a documentary for you and to see how you can be able to come up with a solution for that. So these are other ways in which you can find funding for projects that are within your area of expertise and see how to run with them. So keep going. Climate change, you know, is everywhere. It's adaptable. It's a topic of interest. Every time we have a G something or we have a summit on this going on, it's always a good time to be able to actually speak about the impact of some of these things. So good luck with ensuring that your opinions are put out there and are aired. Group 3, can we have the third group share, please? Anybody from the third group or the fourth one? Anyone willing to please share with us the third or the fourth group? Go ahead, Christian. Go ahead.
Right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Christian Opoku-Kwati, an assistant research scientist with CSIR Forestry Research Institute of Ghana. I'm speaking on behalf of Group 4. Yes, so in our group, we had 4 oral submissions, and the first one was that illegal mining is a topical issue in Ghana now, and that it has led to the depletion of or pollution of water resources, leading to the illegal mining and its impact on water quality, cocoa, and food production. So it pollutes the water bodies, and of course, a lot of cocoa farms are being lost and other agricultural landscapes are being destroyed in the process of the artisanal mining. And that is having adverse effect on the livelihood of a lot of the locals, in that the big percentage of revenue from illegal mining goes into the pockets of the top brass, and the rippling effects are very negative on the masses. And the professional opinion that is put across is to enforce sustainable mining regulations to safeguard environmental quality and food production alongside mining for socio-economic development. And the second submission that came up also from Ghana had to do with plastic pollution and associated adverse effects on marine ecology and coastal scenic beauty. And it is also recommended that the best practices are adopted to ensure that our beaches and even communities are rid of plastic. And an example was cited as the Bermuda Island, where instead of plastic, they use paper bags. And I know other countries in Ghana, like Rwanda, also use paper bags. And even Kenya too is trying to ban plastic to a very large extent, at least control its use. And another submission from Zimbabwe had to do with land reforms, in that it must not be politicized, because that approach has not helped since independence. And there's the need to sustain agricultural production, settlement construction, and socioeconomic development. And finally, from Uganda, there was a submission that over the years, several interventions have been rolled out to combat cholera outbreaks. However, it keeps recurring every year, mainly because the local communities are not directly involved during the implementation of solutions. But if it is rather done the other way around, engaging local communities right from the beginning to the end of programs, then there is a sure way of either eliminating cholera from the country or reducing it drastically. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's those are excellent contributions that you've done, touching across very critical areas. I think that you've done. I like that they were even what is it called? There was even the professional opinion came through, and you are able to discuss what to do. I would encourage each one of you to be able to think through and find a way in which we can actually get to air these opinions, as we've said, in a manner that is just professional, the same way you've done it, in a way that is not pointing fingers or creating animosity, but you come out with this solid points. I mean, each one of this that has been given is very easy to turn it into a newsletter article, to turn it into a feature, to turn it into, and like we talk about illegal mining, you know, what are some of the challenges, and after you do the story, and then at the end is you can talk about some of the factors we can mitigate. Is that, what if we used sustainable mining regulations and we ensure that this is, how is it, you know yourself how that works. So I'd love to see some of these things and to challenge you, please, from this discussion, sit down and just think about, what if I actually implemented and ensured that at least I have a written piece this year outside of my scientific input, so that I can contribute as a thought leader within my country, my community where I am. The last group, is there anybody who would like to speak before we move on? Anyone or anybody who has any contributions or any feedback to give from what has been discussed? I also hope that you're learning each other, you're finding places where of similarity, places of concurrence, places where you can support one another and collaborate just by these discussions that you're doing. Group, the last group, any group that hasn't spoken and has somebody who would like to contribute? Going once, going twice, going thrice. Okay, so we can move on to the next slide. So we are looking, because we've talked about the things that are in our space that we can do. We want to keep going to the style of the op-ed. How is it written? The style of an op-ed should be lively and provocative, with a clear message and a transparent structure. Reading an op-ed should not be hard work for the general public. We avoid the boilerplate jargon, we avoid hyperbole and righteous indignation. That is why I said we're not blaming anybody. We're not saying I'm right, this is my view, I'm right. You know, strong, colorful language and a memorable phrase or two will catch the editor's attention and lend support to the argument presented. Sometimes, especially when in features, or even once in a while in this, if you're writing for a newsletter or an institutional bulletin, the author is looking, the editor is looking for a quote that will stand out. And you'll see it's either going to be put in the middle, in the quotation marks, it's in a different font from what has been written. So this is what we are looking for, a memorable phrase that will actually even be quoted. And if you see in some newspapers, you actually have the thought of the day, and your opinion could actually be quoted, or what you said as a newsmaker, as a policymaker, will be put as a quote with your image across. So in the op-ed page, the editor looks for clarity, he looks for brevity, he looks for newsworthiness, and sometimes he will look for controversy. That's why we are looking for, say what you need to say. You know, controversy doesn't mean that you're fighting, but it means that your opinion is contrary to what everybody else is saying, okay? So that's what we are thinking about. And then it needs to be intelligent. You're a thought leader. The op-ed page is for thought leaders. You can express contrarian views in a unique voice. And this if you send an op-ed to the editor, you get a positive response. It doesn't only have to be your media people. That's why as long as you keep finding a way to write, and to write in a manner that is actually, people are reading you. This person, he writes well on LinkedIn. I need to follow their page. This person, what did they say in 360 characters on X or on Twitter? I need to follow them. So this is how you get your following, because you present yourself as a thought leader in the areas where you're speaking. The next slide. So the guidelines, when we think about how should we write, track the news, just like we are doing. This is what the last exercise has been. What is in the news in my area of expertise that I'm doing? Track the news, jump at opportunities. One of the things I forgot to do was to look at the calendar. Usually there's a UN calendar of annual days or a global calendar of annual days that are celebrated. Track the ones that make sense to you, that make meaning for you, either in your space of culture. Remember, I said it's not only in your workspace, but in culture, in society, the things that matter to do, your national days. Think about where you can write or what you can or what you can do. The timing of your piece is essential. We want to look at what is dominating the news. Is it a famine? Is it floods? Is it war? Is it a stock market panic or just the latest controversy on a reality TV show? That's what readers want to read and op-ed editors want to publish. On this one, what we are just saying is there are sometimes, like for those of you who have, let me give this example of South Africa, because maybe it's one that recently caught the headlines. The South African issue of this lady who was from, what is it called? The Nigerian lady who was living in South Africa with her family. And when she made it to the face of Nigeria, they said, face of South Africa, they said she's not South African, she's Nigerian, she cannot represent us in the Miss Universe pageant. And she went on, she had to go back to Nigeria to present that. So if you foreground those cultural nuances and realities, so it became a trend, the whole continent. Everybody has a voice and waiting. Nigeria entered the chat, as we say, it came in and it as they say, it collected its own people, and then everybody had something to say. She went on to become, I think, the first runners-up for Miss Universe and went back home, and Nigerians, South Africans were applauding. So those kind of things that actually affect the continent, and we're talking about them. So how do you talk about something like that? When you're talking about cross-cultural differences, you could actually opine something like that with regards to with barriers. For those of you who research what is it called, who research migration trends, talk about migration in that space. Think about different cultures and how they own things and how they feel or they appeal strongly towards this is our own, this is not our own, ownership. That's what we are saying. Even controversy, editors want to pick up on those things. And also that's what readers want to think, as long as the timing is the right timing. So you link your issue explicitly to something happening in the news. Don't talk about the 1984 famine in 2015 and it's in 2025 and there's no correlation to that, okay? If you're a researcher, for instance, studying meteorology, start by discussing the ongoing famine and then give your opinion. So it's January, it's been very hot, and then we have the rains. What do you have to say about that with regards to climate change in Kenya? What are you talking about weather patterns? How do you explain yourself? And then how do you introduce what you're learning as a researcher, your area of study, the patterns that you're doing? How do you talk about this in the existing trends? So we want to hear these things as far as an op-ed is concerned. Guidelines for op-eds, we are talking about keep it to 800 words. Next slide, we're saying keep it to 800 words. Shorter is even better. And then sometimes in academia, you insist you want more room to explain your argument, but actually you don't. For those of you who read or have subscribed to a weekly publication that is done from South Africa called The Continent. The Continent, the word count we are given is 350 words. You have to say what you're saying about your country in 350 words. That's like you have just opened your first paragraph. So we can synthesize anything, even abstracts. Okay, abstracts you're given a little more words, because you're writing for academic writing, an abstract has to be longer. Chapter 1 of a PhD thesis, is an actual chapter, and you know how long you've taken to research that chapter. It's like you're writing an entire thesis for masters with that introductory PhD just to get accepted into the program. So some authors insist we need more room, but learn to be brief. Learn to write an SMS with that text that you're writing and think. Then remember, newspapers have limited space to offer. Editors, if they want to cut the article, by the way, they'll chop it to where they feel. They won't even take your closing paragraph with the way you've thought you've closed well, They'll just chop it 700 words, chua, and they go with that, even if you're left hanging in the middle of your thought. So the reader is like, this person didn't finish what they were saying. You did, it just didn't make it. So if the editor tells you, give me 600 words, give him 575 words. And then you make a single point, but make it well. Remember, you cannot solve all the world's problems in 800 words. And that's why I'll also encourage you, if you really think you're a critical thinker and there are things that you want to say, learn to populate your LinkedIn profile. Have a good LinkedIn profile. And it's not every time you must say something, but when you say something, say it well. It's well researched, it's well written, so that people are able to repost and say, this person is actually a thought leader. Be satisfied with making a single point clearly and persuasively. Then our tip usually say, if you cannot explain your message in a sentence or two, you're trying to cover too much ground. You're trying to cover too much ground and you don't have the time, the time for that. Another guideline is put your main points at the top. You know, this means that you have to convince the reader what they are reading is worth their valuable time so that they can continue. And this time we have such little space in our brains to be able to follow through. We just want to, okay, move. Is that person, so is it someone I like? Do I read them? Okay, move. It's a new person. What are they saying? Paragraph 1, 2, 3, move. But at least you've read the first paragraph. Maybe the next time you write something, they'll finish the article, you know? You have no more than 10 seconds to hook a busy reader, which means you shouldn't clear your throat with the witticism or historical aside. Why should the readers care? At the end of every paragraph, ask yourself, so what? Who cares about what I'm writing? Ask yourself this question. So you're in a point where you should what is it called? Yourself peer reviewing. You're reviewing yourself. You're saying, when I'm writing this paragraph, why does it matter? Why does it matter? Who cares about this? Okay, keep going, okay? Will your suggestions help reduce readers' taxes? These suggestions that you're making, because an op-ed, you're giving an opinion with a solution or with a point. Will it protect from disease? Will it make their children happier? Will it improve livelihoods in that area, okay? Those of us who are talking about demining and things like that, and communities that are being asked in terms of climate change from this profession to another, the feedback you're giving, is it actually going to help to improve that person's livelihood, even if their mainstay has been taken away? Important. So it should appeal to, an appeal to self-interest, is usually to self-interest or people's interest is more effective than an abstract panditry. We are just saying, I'm a pandit, I'm thinking aloud, I'm writing aloud. So if it has an interest to somebody, we can move forward for that. Okay, the next one is offer specific recommendations. An op-ed is not a news story that simply describes a situation. It is your opinion on how we can improve a matter. You need to offer recommendations. Are we talking about, can we improve the policy? I've heard that from somebody. I like that. You know, what else? Showing how to is better than just discussing. An example we are giving is in the much publicized Horn of Africa famine that we had a couple of years ago before COVID, which stretched to northern Kenya. We had what we call the Kenyans for Kenyan campaign. The Red Cross was involved. Lots of money was put into that. Lots of it went into northern Kenya to try and see how the communities there, when the rains began, could be able to be self-sustaining, because the drought was bad. I remember driving through the country in the scorching heat, just looking at fields stretching on ends and everything is dry. We remember that. But do you remember the police and the various technical meetings that were done by the CGIAR group and carried during the period? Do you remember those things? We remember the humane aspects, okay? The humane aspects. We don't remember the policy papers that probably actually came to improve the livelihood. Maybe we might not remember the technical meetings, but if somebody had written about who sits in those meetings, okay? Who sits in those meetings, where they come from, the situation in those places that they come from, and how they are ensuring that this thing should never happen. Or if it happens again and there's a drought of this magnitude, we we are able to reduce the risks, okay? The risks of the communities dying and the populations dying in that place. Those are the things you remember. Humans are vain. They remember colorful details better than dry facts. And sometimes science is just factual. So humanize your writing, humanize what you're doing. Look for great examples that will bring your argument to life. That's what I've said. This person sitting in the meeting, why should they care? Why should the CGIAR representative care about how the crops are down, how research into that area is doing? Because she comes from a community. Maybe she has to send money for her grandmother, or not even money, even food, because there's no food around to buy. You send food from Western Kenya, come across, it goes to the central part or to Makueni, which is dry, and her grandmother finds way to eat there. So when I'm creating these guidelines, it matters for me because I have a community that is looking to me to make a difference. That is colorful. Okay, that is an example that will bring my argument to life. So these are the policies now we are instituting. And I'm trying to bring in a policy that will help my grandmother in the village. That's what we are asking. Use short sentences and paragraphs. And then we say, looking at op-ed, look, when you're reading now a newspaper, or you have a newspaper in your offices, look at the op-eds, look at the style of writing. What are people writing? How do they write? What are they passing across? You can see it's short, it's brief, it's to the point. And then you should use the same style, relying mainly on the same declarative sentences that they are making. Avoid tedious rebuttals, okay? Especially if you're writing for industry. If you've written your article in response to an earlier piece that made your blood boil, okay? Or a scientist that challenged your findings, avoid the temptation to prepare a point-by-point rebuttal. I don't know why these science numbers are appearing on this presentation, but avoid the temptation to, you're looking at them still in anger at what they wrote last week, you know, because there's something that is called right of reply, and actually media likes this. Oh, so scientist A said this, scientist B, I want to counter. Bring it on, let's counter, let's see now what it is. So you will counter what has been said, but don't waste your time issuing a point-by-point rebuttal because it will make you look petty. Mention the earlier article once. My colleague from so-and-so, who is even my friend from high school, who I deeply respect, wrote XYZ about this area or field of research on this. I would like to counter some of the allegations or to issue some clarification with regards to what he has said. Then you argue your own case. You have said it once. Now we have known that you're actually responding to that, but then argue now your case. Use your wisdom. Make your ending a winner. Summarize your argument in a strong final paragraph. Remember I said within the word count because your finishing is important, but we need to be able to see it, and this will be thrown away if your word count exists. Conclude with a phrase or a thought that appeared in the opening and close your circle, close your loop. Same way when you're doing a presentation, whatever you open with is the same thing that you can use to close with, but having factored in everything that you're saying. So you close your loop, you know, with that anecdote, you can tailor it again in such a way. Now we have submissions. How do I get there? This thing you're talking about op-ed for writing for the media, how do I get there? Newspapers and commentary sites, they post guidelines. You have the editor's letter. You have the opinion editor's email. They always write it on that page or on the editorial page about how they can refer or how they receive submissions. You should provide an email address. They provide an email address where you can submit the article electronically. You can even write on Twitter, dear to the newspaper, and write, kindly share your email address for opinions. Include your contact information at the end of that and say whether you have a photo of yourself to accompany your article. So in Kenya, where do you submit articles? The Daily Nation, the Standard, the East African, we have the Star, we have blogs. Choose well-known blogs in your field, and we have good bloggers, we have good writers, we have good people who are interviewing within these spaces, and they're happy to take on your articles. Newsletters for your institute or even your partners institute, the partners that you work with. These newsletters are a good place to put your word forth. And then the follow-up, the online editors will call you or email you back if they plan to use your piece. If you don't hear back from them, consider yourself as one of the few who submitted and they did not get feedback. But don't worry. Remember, I told you, LinkedIn profile speaks for you these days. Put your thoughts on that profile, okay? Put your thoughts into a PDF, meaning paste it on your LinkedIn. You'll be able to see that you'll get a lot more readership, even from people within or your followers, like-minded people who like your content, who are able to read it. Never let your opinions go wasted, especially if they're rich in content, okay? If you must follow up with a phone call, make sure to keep it short. Never call after 3 p.m. when editors are on deadline. Timing is everything. Then for compensation, larger newspapers, especially from a global area, may pay for a stipend for pieces that they publish. I'm talking about op-eds alone, but most of them pay nothing. Or if you're one-off contributor for a feature article, okay, features are a bit more complex because they'll only take people who are within their area of expertise, who they have a contract with, they're the ones they'll pay. But if you're willing to contribute, just tell them, I'd like to contribute something. It's something that I've researched on, I'm good with, I can contribute, but don't follow up the pay if they do not tell you that we will pay. Or if you want, you're kind of person who likes writing only for people who will pay because we don't pay in exposure, it does not help us, then just go into that. So now on the issues we had discussed, and we've discussed many topical issues, okay? And this one I'll leave with you to think about. You can create an opinion editorial out of this article. So in your groups that you did, think about it. Remember that we had some points. We talked about climate change. We talked about gender matters, okay? And how they are being politicized and how we are trying to take the high road of the left right wing. And then we had gender, we had the ICT ministry and how we are supporting researchers, you know, in innovation and policy. How does it work for us? Think about how you can turn this into, into that. The person who was talking about the WHO and how it will affect, I think also there's this billionaire who came up and he said, we're gonna give funding to the tune of what the US was giving in terms of funding, since they have stopped being members of and they don't want to support climate change issues. Think about that and see how it will now help. Who are the next funders? How does this change? How does this change the what cycles? Are we now going to pander to the new person who's giving us the information? So this you can actually continue a discussion on and see how it can be changed. So we won't have that discussion, but I will now invite questions from each of you, from any of you, in terms of any of the content that we've discussed, any thoughts that you would want to come across or to share from the discussions or what we've discussed in the last 2 days. And I would also want somebody to tell me what their take homes are at the end of this discussion. What are you carrying from here? And what do you think you have gained that you would not otherwise have? I mean, that you'd like to try and amplify this year in your communication that you have not previously used before. Over to you for questions, for comments, for feedback to all of us.
Thanks, Madam Ann. My name is Conrad.
Yes, Conrad, go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, I'm just privileged to attend this session and this training. I, as you know, we're from the different professionals and doing different work. I've learned a lot of things that I never imagined. Working with, I'm focused on health facility assessment, and mostly I'm a field monitor, supervisor, like things like that. So I've come to understand a lot of things that I never knew. I really appreciate for the session, and more, you have been so detailed on everything, and I wish it would be like this periodically, that we get some session like this, trainings like this. Thanks so much.
Hello. Hello.
Go ahead, Jackson, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity that I've been one of the participants for this training. It has been very impressive and hands-on, practical. I feel I'm in a position to write a news article. Really, I've learned so many things, and really, I wanted to express my sincere gratitude for this training. Maybe my request also, if you would share, dear facilitator, with us some magazines that always ask for news articles through which we can express our research abilities or opinions. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Go on, John. Go on, John.
Okay, so for me, I will simply echo the words of the previous presenter, especially when it comes to communicating to the non-scientists. I experienced the same thing. There was a time we were to submit an article, and you know, in us who are in physics generally, we normally put, you know, these brief statements where you don't give much information. You simply put, you put concrete information in about 2 to 3 sentences. And then when I gave it to one of my colleagues to review it, and then he asked me a very simple question. So whom are you communicating this paper to? Well, I said I'm communicating it to those professionals in laser physics and maybe spectroscopy. And then he asked me another question. Now, what about those who are not in the area and they may have the interest to join you? So I thought about it for some time. And from that day, then I've taken this approach of you try to use layman language in a way. You simplify the sentences. You go to some level of clarity. You give finer details without making any assumption. So, and I think that was the essence of this training, that when we are communicating our research findings, especially in us in research and in academia, don't assume that what you publish will be led by the professionals in your field. It's the same in the newspapers, like what you have just trained us. When we have to report something in the newspapers, we have a wider audience, people who are not specialists in your area. So you have to frame your story in a way that at least they get something out of it. They may not get everything, but they have understood those simple concepts concerning your point of argument. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm happy that you have really clarified on the same. Okay, thank you.
No, thank you for that comment. And I want to say that we are really curious about the work that you do, all of you, for most of you, because we don't know, we don't, like now when you talk about your, in the field of physics, you're probably a professor in that area. I have no, so now I'm curious. I'm like, okay, so what you do on a daily basis, you know? Physics was tough for me. So how do you reach that point where there are so many questions to ask you, even as a profile, to profile yourself? So I like that you said we write, remember we are saying we write for different audiences. We've been writing for the papers which have given us where we are, because you know, even to be a professor, you must publish. You must reach the point where you publish, and the more you publish is better. But remember to synthesize that information so that you don't only remain a professor or a doctor in your line, but then you're able to bring the information to us ordinary people. Think about how you'd be talking to a 5-year-old and just having a nice discussion with them and chatting and backgrounding that, or something simple that you see on the road and it has knowledge with the law of physics. We'd really love to read about that, especially for those of you in technical sciences. I think we need more profiles in this area. It's just that we don't even have access to them. Okay, so let's do that. If you think you're doing something, especially in Kenya, that is groundbreaking, and you have something interesting that is not normally done, we want to hear those stories. And the person who's challenged me, actually, even before, just to add to this, before we give the final presentation, I'm going to take up that challenge and see which links I can put up. I'll look for them, because I'm familiar with a couple of them, for where you can actually become a commentator, or you can write for, or you just your findings, but in a layman's language, in a way that we can understand. But we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. We want you to talk about those complex things, and then we are happy to listen to it. The person who was talking about dealing in property and working, the first person, I get a lot of insights from a friend of mine who writes on LinkedIn about property and housing and what is going on in the industry, the trends. Last year, because of this LinkedIn profiles that he's doing, he attended an international conference. He's now a thought leader in that area, and now looking at the differences. And so you just think, just demystify what you're doing and write for me and you who do not understand what you're saying. We are very happy to read what you have, because your expertise is, you know much more than the ordinary person, but we can't access you. So keep thinking. I'm really grateful for the gentleman who is saying that he's now ready to write somewhere, to write for a publication, to write for somewhere. That's what we want at the end of this. So keep going. So I'll also give a moment to my colleague Kevina, who's really been a huge support and hands-on. She's the one who deals with all of you in terms of now the administrative issues with regards to what is happening. To also tell you how you can plug in. I know she's written it on the chat, but to tell you how you can plug in with TCC, and it's because of this institution that we are able to even come do this training. A lot going on, putting together all you scientists and the knowledge that you have in that. So she can help us to see how to plug in, and also some of the areas where you can follow our work, you can follow our thought processes, and then we'll see whether we can end early and allow you then to move. As she said, we'll send in the materials for training together at the end, and also how you can reach back to them and feed them back in terms of post training and see. Kevina, over to you so that you can tell us how can we plug into the TCC community.
Thank you so much, Anne. That was an amazing 2 days. My name is Kevina Zeni, for those who we have not been introduced to yet. I'm from Training Center in Communication, which is a capacity building trust at the University of Nairobi. I think first of all, I'd just like to thank everyone for their dedication and commitment to the 2 days of training, as well as for your active participation. I can only hope that this session was insightful and that you will have more confidence communicating your work to different audiences. And even when you feel you're confident now to maybe do an op-ed, feel free to submit to our email. I'm going to put it in the chat in just a short while, and then Anne can have a look at it and you'll get your feedback. So before we close, I have a few announcements. As mentioned yesterday by my colleague Nicole, certificates are available for those who attended both training days. So if you have not filled in your attendance form, please do so, or send your 2 names as you would like to appear in the certificate in the email address, the admin@tccafrica.org. For those who've been inquiring, the notes and the recordings will be shared to you, to your emails after the session. And then we have shared various resources in the chat, including our podcast. We also have a TikTok channel where we have mentorship sessions every Thursday and Sunday live. So if you have any pressing issues, you don't have to wait till the next training to get help. And also we have a WhatsApp group where you can get help from your peers and also our mentors who are usually on standby. I think that is all for now. I hope to see you in the next training session. Please let me know in case of anything. You can reach me at admin@tccafrica.org. I think someone has a question.
Yes, I have.
Okay, good.
We didn't get the link for day 2.
Okay, I'm going to share all the links just now in the chat, and then I'll give the meeting a few minutes before ending it.
Okay,
so that
thank you.
Yeah, okay. So if you have any feedback, feel free to tag us on social media. You can also utilize the feedback form that we have put in the chat, so that we can improve our training sessions and make this better for all of you. Thank you. If anyone has additional feedback, please welcome Ann.
No, it's
Hello.
just for me.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, I have a question about you had promised certificates. Will they be there?
Yes, certificates will be given probably in the next 2 days, by Friday. So please put in your names in the attendance form or send in your names to the admin email in the chat. Yes, Didier.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's at the same time a question and a comment which I want to make. I'll start with the comment. We know that Africa has been struggling for the past decades with a lot of infectious disease. And this has not been stopping because now there are new trends, especially HIV/AIDS, there are new trends amongst the young population, the adolescent, which is still plaguing our public health systems. But there is something which is quite amazing, which is not often talked about, and that is mental health. It's quite surprising that in most areas in Africa, the issue of mental health is not discussed openly and publicly. And this is quite paradoxical, especially that it seems, I'm using the word it seems because that's where the controversy is put forward. It seems that Africa holds a variety of higher statistics as concerns mental health indicators as compared to the North. So there is a real paradox in the absence in consideration, in absence of awareness raising at the level of communication with respect to mental health. And I want to know, why is it so? Why are media professionals in general, the public in general? Yes, we will advance the issues of witchcraft, we'll advance the issues of a lot of things which we know in Africa. But I really want to know, is there like any other reason making it so complicated or so difficult for media professionals to talk about mental health, to raise awareness significantly, whereas the statistics from a community-based level in the hospitals where I work shows that there is need. People are suffering. People are really suffering. It's really mind-blowing how this crucial issue is totally undiscussed amongst in fact, it's not a trend, it's not a consistent trend among the media. Whereas it's essential now. Mental is almost a key major element in everything. How can we develop our communities without mental health? Climate change is affecting mental health. HIV/AIDS is mental. Basically, everything is linked to mental. But it's so amazing that nothing. The trends are. It's quite strange. So I want us to discuss about it, please. Thank you very much.
Please, someone answer Didier, especially if you're within that profession. Go ahead and just give a response. And I'm hoping on that issue especially that you can find collaborators here who are going to put in good feedback on that. Yes, Mr. Githaiga?
Okay, my question is, I think it's similar to my colleague. I just wanted to find out, now you see, like now we have so many participants, where it's a suggestion that maybe next time we can have, we have the list of participants and the area of specialization, because, we come from wide areas of engagement. So even now I can't know whom I can collaborate with, because that information is lacking. So maybe that one you can look at it. The other one is, do you normally organize physical conferences? I mean, where people can now meet physically and engage with each other, rather than being online. Well, maybe for Kenyans it might work, but I know your organization, your group has a lot of money, it seems.
Kevina, you can answer that. And please remember, we're also hosted by the University of Nairobi, and it is one of our main partners. And that's why yesterday we had the privilege of having Professor Leonida opening. So if you're from the University of Nairobi, maybe you can ask how we can have more of these trainings physically. But Kevina, can you respond on how far our trainings go to? And remember also, like we're saying, it's also an issue of access. It's also an issue of how do we get everyone together and funding for that.
Yes, thank you, John, for your question. As Anne mentioned, for the sake of accessibility, because our audience is very wide, most of our training sessions are virtual, but we do have specific hybrid sessions. And for this, you'll be informed in due time in our WhatsApp communities and the emails.
Okay, yeah, and everywhere you see, wherever you see, like even yourselves, if you're organizing a conference, I know there's someone here from Namibia who is doing that. I think it's an ICT conference. If you find that you have opportunity to invite TCC to support you in that conference, in whatever you're doing, please reach out to us. You have the management contact, you have Kevina's contact, you can send the invite. And also see how you can include them as part of that. But I also want to say, I don't want to take away from from the question that was asked, I think, by Didier, because you're the practitioners as well in this area. But the issue of mental health, one is we've really not scratched the surface. I'm surprised he's saying that there's more prevalence of mental health issues here in Africa than it is in Europe. And perhaps the issue is that they have embraced it and they have come to realize that this is it. I think we are now just beginning to grapple with these things in Africa. Like, I do know that there's been an uptake, particularly in younger learners, on the issues of autism. We didn't have as many autism cases as we have had in the last 10, 15 years. Why has that changed? What is the issue? Psychiatrists and psychologists are actually one of the biggest, one of the largest growing branches of medicine, or people are branching into that area because there's need. People want to talk about their issues. They have issues, they are not coping well. What are the mechanisms? So I want to see that in paper. I want to see a paper that is maybe 5 pages synthesized into one article. And I'll also challenge you, because you can see these issues and statistics and prevalences, begin writing about them. I know you may not have the time, so challenge yourself. Let me do 1 article per month based on a specific person. I don't need to name, but give your characters a face or what is it called, or a profile, so that you talk about them and you say, this is the challenge with this person this month. This is how they are coping. This is where African traditions are coming in. And I like what John said. I think next time they'll see whether we can actually pull together the list of participants. Of course, all these things require consent these days. Consent is everything in media, even in groups, so that then we are able to share, and you give consent for us. Can I share out your email address so that we can collaborate? And I'm sure there are people in that field of science, of mental health, of medicine, who are willing to actually see and even co-author conference papers, see whether we can even come together as Africa, put a conference together on paper and look for funding for that, and say, we want to discuss this at a global level. We are practitioners, and then you bring in those who are dealing with the children, you bring in the educationists. But like I'm saying, I'm surprised to hear that it's more prevalent in Africa than it has. Issues like ADHD, issues like now we are figuring what is happening with our older parents is actually dementia. But what is dementia? How do you explain dementia to older people? So I like that we are having these discussions. Remember, I said you have knowledge we do not have. Please put it out there and help us to demystify, help us to learn. And let's find the right platforms for that. Samuel?
Yeah, thanks so much. Aubrey, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Samuel, loud and clear.
Oh, great. Thanks, Anne. Thanks so much for the wonderful training. Yeah, really enjoyed and learned a lot. I'd ask a question in the form which we had provided before, but maybe I'm not sure if it has been responded to. But I wanted to find out what are the best practices, or what are the guidelines when it comes to the use of generative AI in this science communication area. Thank you.
So that's another collaboration in the offing. If you have, I think there's one more, there are a couple of people here in the field of AI. Samuel, you need a collaboration on that. I think that question might not be able to be answered here. I like what Didier has said. He's shared his contacts for those who are willing to speak about or collaborate or hear more about each other in the area. And it's good when you're a mass, when you're across Africa, you even command more voice than if you're speaking on just on behalf of your country. So we'll take maybe 2 more comments. Mofokeng, we began with you. Maybe we can just hear your closing thoughts.
Yes, I just want to express my gratitude, for the opportunity and this platform that offers us, some avenues for networking and brainstorming of ideas. Our experiences, some of the things that we take for granted. I mean, as you are going through the historical feature, the feature writing and so on, something came to my mind, and it actually married to the issue of mental health, because what we're seeing today, whenever we go to shops, supermarkets, you know, you name them, trading centers, you are confronted with lots and lots of foodstuffs that look so much attractive, appealing, and when you look deeper into them, they've got so much sugar, they've got so much oil, they are quite acidic, and they tend to upset the pH balance in our bodies. And this thing takes slowly, and we are not quite aware about it. By the time we we visit doctors, the damage has been done. And it will be quite interesting, maybe just for us or maybe one person to track or trace, you know, the evolution of food habits amongst African people from the 1960s until now. Just to have a look, and you will find that so much has changed, and we have not actually changed in terms of caring after our bodies. Most of the time, we eat things that we even don't know whether our bodies accept them or not. We just eat anything that passes in front of our faces. And that's where most of our illnesses lie. It's so heartbreaking, and I know very well that perhaps as we are engaged in our different careers, you know, different research fields and so on, some of these things are possible. We can look at them, we can think about them, we can actually project them and foreground to the general public, you know, because I mean, I'm saying, even if it's not information, but just awareness. Awareness is important because it actually becomes your consciousness and your conscience that guides you all the time to say, but why are you keep on doing this when you know that you are supposed to be doing another thing differently from what you are doing? So these are the kind of things that, I mean, when we grew up, we took, we looked down upon our grandmothers and mothers. You know, they used to give us some kind of foods that we did not enjoy. But on hindsight, when we look back and we look at what we are eating now, we begin to realize the wisdom that they possess. We begin to realize the awareness that they had about what our bodies needed or what our bodies wanted, other than what we need for our bodies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Another collaboration now from a different way on the field of mental health, what is affecting. Remember, we can put all these thoughts together. I think we have an academic journal loading here or a paper that we can do together. I'll let Dan respond probably as the last one, because we also want to honor your time. You have honored us with your presence, and thank you for being here as many as you can. So maybe Dan can give us the closing comment, and we can thank you for those also who are happy to share what the areas they are working in, and let's keep this going. As Kevina said, just give us a thumbs up, give us your comments and feedback, and let's keep talking to one another as researchers. For me, I'm all for, if I ever have an assignment where I need to collaborate with a doctor or a researcher in any area, I want to come to you who are in this group, in this field, because we've already found a common ground, so that then we can see how to work together. And remember, I told you, check out, I believe it is National Geographic, and see what calls they have, I think, for some funding within that space. So I'll let Dan have the last say and we can close so that we can honor your time for the day. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'd like to thank TCC Africa for the training and particularly Ann Mucheke. I am sure I'm speaking for all of us when I say that now we are more expanded and interesting version of ourselves because the training was deeply transformative, and that hopefully we will take up the task and write more so that we can continue enlightening the public on the truths that we chance upon in our research work. And yeah, so I'm deeply grateful, and maybe to focus on one aspect of this training, which is now the trainer. I would say that many of us, I'm speaking for some of us, I'm not going to say everyone, but I am sure most of us would like to make such brilliant presentations in future. Yeah, you are a paragon of excellence in communication, and yeah, we are looking forward to being like you and holding down such trainings. Yeah, so lastly, yeah, thanks again. And also maybe my area of focus is in social and political psychology. So if someone is interested in that, yeah, I'm up for collaboration. Yeah. So again, thank you, TCC, and thank you, Ann Mucheke. Yeah. This training exceeded my expectations, and I am not as I was before the training yesterday. Yeah, thank you, and enjoy your afternoon and the rest of the week.
We're so glad to hear that. I have good bosses and I have good mentors in that space. So remember, it's all supporting one another. So yeah, we can thank you so much, everyone. As you can see, the attendance sheet will close the discussion, but leave the chat so that you can take down all the feedback and all the comments that will do. Thank you very much. I always say you guys have more information than I have. It is just teaching you how to extract it so that then you're the ones who are speaking. Because a lot of the voices, let me tell you, and Dan, I love what you're doing, social and political, because I also love to look at the interface between politics, media and politics and governance and things like that. So, I mean, it's good. I'll also follow you and see what you do. But also the people making the loudest noise are not the ones with the information. I'm speaking in front of people who have tons of information and information that we need to hear. I'm just hoping that I've excited you enough for this training and TCC has excited you enough to want to actually put that forth. Please don't die with the knowledge you have. You know, these days life is in God's hands, but keep writing so that you give us, you leave what you have with us. And thank you very much and have a good afternoon.